Chapter 366. One of the snakes suddenly arched its body and jumped forward. It flung its head, and its tongue flew out of its mouth with a schwa sound. It flew 115 feet, and stuck to a martial great master's body with a pa sound. It coiled around his body and shook its head again. That martial great master screamed in fear. His feet left the ground and he flew away like a cloud. He fell into the snake's body. The other snake also jumped up and flung its head. But it had obviously chosen the wrong target. This snake had come for Jing Meng Hun. Jing Meng Hun roared loudly. He jumped up and held a shining sword in his hand. He exhausted his entire body's strength and fiercely chopped down. With a swoosh, smelly bird black blood with some green color splattered everywhere. A section of that long snake's tongue was actually chopped off by his sword. The severed tongue fell to the ground and actually twisted and rolled around like a living thing. In the blink of an eye, it was covered in dust. That snake had suffered a heavy blow. It issued a hiss sound from its mouth, and its huge body rolled on the ground in pain. The other snake hissed strangely. It opened its big mouth and sprayed a pink smoke into the snake's mouth. Slowly the bleeding stopped and the snake stopped writhing. Although it was a little sluggish, it had obviously recovered a lot. This isn't a snake. It's an ancient spirit beast, lust dragon. Jing Meng Hun saw the pink smoke, saw the strange healing method, and looked at the silver horns on the snake's head. He finally understood what these two monsters were. He suddenly covered his nose and retreated at lightning speed. He then shouted, "Quickly retreat. Don't smell that pink smoke." Everyone didn't dare to be negligent. They retreated at full speed for thousands of feet. King-level expert, "What's a lust dragon?" a command horse rider asked. "A lust dragon isn't a thing. It's a strange creature." Jing Meng Hun's spirit was shaken. It could be seen that he felt relieved after knowing that this creature was a lust dragon. This lust dragon looks scary. But it's not difficult to deal with. That's because it doesn't possess any offensive power. It doesn't have any other means of attack apart from the common engulfment and entanglement. Moreover, its speed isn't very fast. But its defense is frightening. Its scales are harder than iron. Take note that their weakness is a white spot the size of a bowl below their head and above their neck. As long as that area was damaged, he would die without a doubt. Also, under the horn on its head there is a similar white spot which is also a fatal spot. Most snakes have a weak point at 7 inches. However, this kind of lust dragon has 2 vital points. Jing Meng Hun quickly said, "Everyone be careful. We'll be rich if we kill these 2 lust dragons." After the lust dragon died, its skin would rot and become worthless. What was valuable was its blood, its poison sac, a spring sac, an inner core and a crystal core. The eyes of the lust dragon were rare pearls, and its blood could be used as medicine. It can be said that every part of his body is a treasure. The more Jing Meng Hun spoke, the brighter his eyes became. It seemed as if this pair of lust dragons had already become his. Then, "That pink smoke, what's going on?" one of them asked. "This lust dragon is the most obscene creature in the world. That pink smoke is secreted from the spring sac inside its body. It has a strong aphrodisiac effect. Even a poison-resistant body wouldn't be able to resist this aphrodisiac." Jing Meng Hun warned, "Everyone, you must be careful. If you don't find a woman to engage in sexual intercourse with within 10 hours, your body will fester and you'll die. Moreover, there's no other way to cure it apart from sexual intercourse. Brothers, it's difficult to find a village girl in this desolate place. So, don't suck it into your stomach." Everyone sucked in a breath of air. This thing was so overbearing. In fact, its blood can also be used to make an aphrodisiac. It can also be used to treat this man's unspeakable pain. Impotence. It's effective in one mouthful. Jing Meng Hun didn't want to speak so clearly. But the eyes of several people lit up as soon as he spoke about this matter. Their faces also turned red. He suddenly realized that these dear friends were afraid that there was something that a man couldn't talk about. Moreover, even if there's nothing wrong with it, it'll become more powerful after taking this blood. It'll at least double in strength. Think about it, how much blood do these 2 big snakes have? Jing Meng Hun sighed. Everyone's eyes lit up. Who didn't want to be more powerful? Its inner core, spring sac, crystal nucleus, poison sac. Jing Meng Hun said, "In fact, all of them can be used to make this. But the effects are different. Cough cough. Even its pearl-like eyes will turn into a super-concentrated aphrodisiac after being soaked in the wine for 2 hours." Everyone's expression became strange. It seemed that these 2 snakes, no lust dragons, were all aphrodisiacs. They were like two aphrodisiac storehouses. Apart from that, they had no other use. No other use? That's the biggest use. Jing Minghun angrily said, this kind of thing is more important for a man than increasing his martial power. It can be said that as long as you have one, you'll become a hot commodity in the upper three heavens even if you don't have the strength to truss up a chicken. Think about it, brothers. There are so many people in the lower heavens continent. On average, there's 1 in 100 people like this. It's like a moving gold mine. As he spoke, he looked at the group of people around him with gratitude and revealed a smile that no one knew the meaning of. For example, among our 3,000 people, there are 70 to 80 people like this. Suddenly, many people looked at their companions with mocking expressions on their faces. The meaning in their eyes was very obvious. Well, it was very profound. It was as if they were inquiring. Suddenly, many people's faces turned red. They angrily cursed in their hearts. You can't casually say this even if you're a king-level expert. How could such a fucking thing be done so casually? Brothers, you must know that these 2 lust dragons will also leave if we leave. But King of Hell Chu will also pass by. Then all our efforts will go down the drain. So, it's better to make a fortune first. Then we'll wait for King of Hell Chu to make a big contribution. Wouldn't that be great? Jing Minghun waved his hand and said, it's settled. Get ready to slaughter these lust dragons. Wah wah wah. The 2 lust dragons rushed over with hissing sounds. These 2 guys obviously hadn't eaten their fill yet. They had easily swallowed 5 people. They felt that these strange creatures in front of them were easy to deal with. One of them had lost half of its tongue, but that was only a minor injury. It would recover in a few days. Therefore, the 2 lust dragons rushed over in an imposing manner. Who would have thought that these strange creatures, which had been like a flock of sheep in front of them, would encounter such a crazy and intensive attack? It seemed as if they had eaten an aphrodisiac. They were attacking their bodies. Moreover, they were jumping up and down. They were using all kinds of tricks one after another. The lust dragons could be considered agile. But they were still far inferior to these people. One of the lust dragons finally received a fatal blow after it had swallowed 7 or 8 people with great difficulty. Jing Minghun used a long sword to spin it. The sword carried the king's vital energy and sent it into the white spot on its lower jaw. The king's vital energy suddenly exploded in the vital part of the lust dragon's body. Blood gushed out like a fountain. The lust dragon issued a loud hissing sound. Its entire body stood erect in pain. It was more than 100 feet tall. Then it fell down with a bang. It rolled over with a loud rumbling sound. Some of the burning trees were uprooted wherever it went. The mountain rocks were sent flying in all directions. It could be said that the rocks were piercing through the clouds. The other lust dragon didn't care about eating people anymore. It only cared about guarding its vital parts. It was already badly battered. However, its 2 vital parts were already dripping with blood as it guarded against the incoming attacks. Suddenly, the dying lust dragon turned around. It opened its big mouth and started to roll backwards at lightning speed. The other lust dragon hissed loudly while covering the rear. Then it followed closely behind. It's running away. The wind is tight. Retreat. Jing Minghun and the others had killed one of them with great difficulty. How could they give up when they saw that the fruits of their labor were about to fall into their hands? They rushed forward to catch up with the lust dragon. They didn't relax at all. The lust dragon issued an angry hissing sound. It turned its head and spurted out a large mass of dense pink fog. Jing Minghun and the experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department held their breaths. They hastily dodged behind. You're running anyway? Jing Minghun was full of confidence in the speed of these 2 lust dragons. These 2 lust dragons are mine today. They can't run away. The lust dragons continued to turn their heads and fled with whooshing sounds. A mountain forest was burning fiercely in front of them. The trees were burning with strange crackling sounds. The whistling sound of the wind and the whistling sound of the flames completely covered the sound of the fight. The 2 lust dragons didn't hesitate to drill into the raging flames. They were afraid of fire. However, they wouldn't die immediately if they drilled into the flames. They would be fine as long as they could pass through the flames quickly. However, they felt that the strange creatures outside were much more terrifying than this fire. The 2 lust dragons went into the fire. Minister Chu's black robe flew high up in the air. He forced the flames away and passed through them like a lightning bolt. Then he came face to face with the 2 lust dragons who were fleeing in distress. Their eyes met. The 4 eyes of the 2 lust dragons were as big as watermelons. They stared blankly at the strange creature that had suddenly rushed out of the sea of flames. Their brains were almost petrified. They would have exclaimed in surprise if they could speak. Fuck. Why isn't this strange creature afraid of fire? Obviously, the creature that came from inside was the same as the ones outside. Moreover, this one seemed to be more powerful. Chapter 367. This pink mist is very dense. It has almost condensed into a solid substance. The lust dragon was so anxious that it spouted half of its spring sac. Too despicable. Too shameless. A group of people is intercepting us from the front. And there's someone who isn't afraid of death waiting here? Do you think that the lust dragons are your prey? Chu Yang hadn't met any enemies along the way. He knew that the situation was extremely urgent. So, he had been very anxious all the way. So, he had flown through the cluster of raging flames. But, he hadn't expected that he would run into two big snakes as soon as he got out of the sea of fire. How can there be snakes in a place of fire? Minister Chu's brain short-circuited. He opened his eyes wide and didn't understand what was going on. Then the enraged lust dragon opened its mouth and spouted a mouthful of pink gas. The two sides were very close to each other. Minister Chu was startled. He hastily held his breath. However, his body was already shrouded in the pink smoke. This is an unexpected disaster. Chu Yang might have been able to take advantage of the chaos and kill his way out if he had arrived a little earlier. The two lust dragons would have attracted most of the enemy's attention if Chu Yang had arrived a little later. Then it would have been very easy for him to escape. However, he was neither too late nor too early. He had appeared in the path of the two lust dragons at this critical juncture. The two lust dragons regarded him as their mortal enemy. So they spouted a mouthful of poisonous gas at him. Ah, that aphrodisiac! It hadn't been inhaled directly. But the pink smoke had shrouded Chu Yang's entire body. It was no different from swallowing it. In fact, it was even more serious. It was because the lust dragon had used almost half of its spring sac in this puff of pink smoke. In fact, it wasn't stingy at all. It had used the entirety of its spring sac on Minister Chu. Fuck. What's this thing? Chu Yang angrily shouted in his heart. He waved his hand and his sleeves fluttered. Then he dispersed the remaining pink smoke. Then the lust dragon ferociously pounced on Chu Yang. It opened its big mouth and ferociously tried to swallow Chu Yang. Chu Yang was extremely angry. Fuck. Did Jing Minghun raise this thing? It knew that it was waiting here to intercept me. It didn't know how to avoid the fire. It's too damn loyal. Anger rose from his heart. The calamity sword appeared in his hand with a clang, and he mercilessly slashed down. How could ordinary swords and sabers compare to the might of such an earth-shattering divine item? How could it be described as resolute and decisive, cutting through iron like it was mud? What's more, Minister Chu's anger, his seven shades and his elemental energy? Chu Yang's sword chopped off the lower jaw of the lust dragon with a swoosh sound. Blood spurted out of the lust dragon's mouth and half of its neck. Chu Yang's body was once again covered with blood. The sword light flashed again. Minister Chu didn't hesitate. Instead, he chopped off the other lust dragon's chin with a schwa sound. This wasn't a fatal blow, but a direct and fatal one. Jing Minghun and the others had also contributed greatly in this matter. In fact, Jing Minghun and his nearly 3,000 experts had already beaten these two lust dragons to the point of exhaustion. One of the vital parts of the lust dragon was broken, while the other two were bleeding. The defensive power of the lust dragon had been greatly reduced by over half. Moreover, the unparalleled might of the calamity sword had been unparalleled since the ancient times. The two lust dragons started to roll over violently. They seemed to be on the verge of death. This wasn't an attack on their vital parts. Instead, it had chopped off their vital parts. How could they not die? They would have died even if they had 2 lives. However, the sword spirit in Chu Yang's mind screamed and rushed out. What did you provoke this time? Why are they so overbearing? Overbearing? Chu Yang didn't feel anything unusual, so he couldn't help but ask. Fuck lust dragons. These are treasures. The sword spirit's voice was somewhat excited. However, it was also somewhat helpless as it said, hurry up and take these 2 guys in. Chu Yang complied. The 2 lust dragons were still rolling over. However, they had lost their lives. Chu Yang's mind moved, and the 2 lust dragons disappeared from their places. Only the raging flames were left in the surroundings. You can go about your business. Outside of the fire, it's your business, the sword spirit said and disappeared without a trace. Chu Yang smiled mischievously. He felt that his blood had started to burn. But he didn't care. He brandished his sword, and the 7 shades cold energy gushed out of his body like a surging tide. The fire was stifled. Then Chu Yang's figure shot out like a meteor. This battle couldn't be avoided. But Chu Yang didn't intend to avoid it. He had already made preparations for it. His sword flashed as he rushed out of the sea of fire. He then saw Jing Menghun and the others rushing over with big strides. Chu Yang laughed out loud. Jing Menghun, you haven't died yet? Come, let me send you on your way. The sword light flashed and emitted 10,000 cold lights. Chu Yang's gloomy voice resounded. It seemed to have the tone of hell. One cold light. 10,000 fathoms piercing light. Jing Menghun and the others were truly depressed. They had seen that such a rare treasure was about to fall into their hands. So they had followed suit for fear of losing it. Even if there was a sea of fire in front of them, they had rushed forward without any hesitation. But who would have thought that everything would change in the blink of an eye? The lust dragons' bodies were still outside the fire. So they weren't in a hurry. But who would have thought that they would disappear into the raging flames with a whooshing sound? Fuck me? Could it be that the eastern side of the fire has melted? Otherwise, how could it disappear so thoroughly? How could Jing Menghun be willing to let such a rare and miraculous thing disappear? He impatiently rushed forward, and wanted to enter the sea of fire to take a look. But he hadn't expected that he would be greeted by a shining sword light as soon as he got close to it. And it turned out to be the target he had been chasing for more than 5,000 kilometers, King of Hell Chu. King of Hell Chu had drilled out of the sea of fire in a high-spirited manner. He didn't run away when he saw Jing Menghun. Instead, he rushed over with even more vigor. King of Hell Chu? Jing Menghun almost died from anger. Why didn't this enemy come out earlier or later? Why did he come out at such a critical moment? Why does this bastard always spoil my plans? Is there anything that he doesn't want to meddle in? This guy has appeared at such a critical moment after I had chased him for more than 5,000 kilometers. He has ruined my beautiful dream. I can go to the upper three heavens if I have the lust dragons. Which clan wouldn't want such a treasure that can increase the chances of their clan's reproduction? Wouldn't I become a delicious cake? My grand dream of the upper three heavens has been shattered by King of Hell Chu's sudden appearance. I will have to give up on the lust dragons once he comes out. And I will have to deal with him with all my strength. But how can I give up on the lust dragons that I have already obtained? What can I do if I don't give up? A thunderous voice resounded behind Jing Menghun. The troops of Iron Cloud have arrived to meet King of Hell Chu. It will take them at most half an hour to arrive here. Killing King of Hell Chu has been going on for nearly a month now. The arduous task of traveling a distance of 11,000 kilometers has only been left for a little more than half an hour. So, this task has been going on for nearly half a month. I won't be able to stop King of Hell Chu from returning to Iron Cloud even if I don't go all out. Not to mention the lust dragons. Diwu Qing Ro alone can peel off my skin. Jing Menghun became anxious, angry, frustrated, helpless, and sad. Thousands of emotions welled up in his mind. Sour, sweet, bitter, spicy, and salty feelings welled up in his heart. Coupled with the sea of fire that covered the mountains and plains, and King of Hell Chu's sudden appearance, it was as if there were clouds in his mind. Thousands of knots appear in my heart. The sea of fire scissors the wind. King of Hell sword flashes. King of Hell is furious. King of Hell Chu. You motherfucker. Give me your life. Jing Menghun shouted, kill this bastard at all costs. The sooner the better. King-level expert Jing hadn't forgotten to kill Chu Yang as soon as possible. He wanted to chase after those two lust dragons. Jing Menghun shouted. He held his sword in his left hand, and faced Chu Yang's 10,000 fathoms of cold light. Dozens of experts in the surroundings rode their swords, and brazenly rushed forward. They turned a blind eye to the formidable lethality of Chu Yang's move. Chu Yang shouted, what harm is there in slaughtering the entire world? At the same time, the sword chi blocked the countless weapons with clanging sounds. At the same time, a murderous aura surged out. Between the heavens and the earth, a stream of light that suppressed all the flames suddenly appeared. It shot through the air with an unstoppable force, and rushed towards the countless weapons and enemies that were coming in disorder. Chu Yang's eyes were ice-cold and calm. His lips slightly bent down and presented a cruel arc. His heart was calm and filled with murderous intent. Countless weapons hacked down on that perfectly round beam of light with a loud bang. Even Jing Menghun's sword in his left hand hacked down with all his might. The sword light scattered a little. Chu Yang spat out a mouthful of blood. But the sword light still condensed, and rushed into the crowd of the Golden Horse Riders department behind Jing Menghun and the others. It plowed a path of blood and minced flesh like an iron plow. King of Hell Chu left a trail of minced flesh and blood wherever he passed. However, his momentum had been exhausted. He finally fell down after he had rushed for a distance of 15 feet. He was immediately surrounded. Chu Yang looked up to the sky and laughed. He had suddenly unleashed his ferocious nature at the most critical juncture of his escape. He didn't know what was going on. He had completely ignored the fact that he had been injured. The injuries of others were still manageable. But Jing Minghun's all-out attack wasn't easy to deal with. However, he clearly felt that his blood was boiling. He had an inexhaustible strength. He only wanted to kill. He wanted to kill to his heart's content. Chu Yang had never experienced this kind of situation since his rebirth. His mind had been affected by the Tribulation Sword in his previous life. That was the only time he had experienced this kind of crazed killing. But it was clear that he was controlling the Tribulation Sword now. It wasn't the Tribulation Sword controlling him. So, how could this situation occur? Chapter 368. More than a dozen enemies had died under Ku Ren's sword. The Tribulation Sword's ability to devour living beings had been activated. So his body didn't feel tired. Chu Yang roared. All the evil tendencies of his previous and current lives were suddenly aroused from the deepest part of his heart. He felt like he was going crazy with killing. It seemed that he wouldn't be able to vent his anger if he didn't kill. He dashed left and right in the crowd like a mad tiger. Wherever the Tribulation Sword went, the sound of weapons breaking could be heard. The Tribulation Sword's tip flashed with an amazing light. The sword's edge was dark red. It seemed as if a demon was baring its fangs and smiling ferociously. The sword's blade was ice cold. It didn't get stained with blood after killing people. It was like a cold and emotionless executioner who was indifferently taking countless lives. The 3 fragments of the Tribulation Sword had also been aroused by this crazy killing. These 3 fragments of divine weapons had existed since ancient times. They were sharp killing weapons. The meaning of their existence, or the meaning of the Tribulation Sword's creation, was to kill. Now they had officially returned to their original profession. The murderous aura was getting thicker and thicker. Jing Minghun was startled as he looked at Chu Yang's figure dashing left and right. This dreadful king of Hell Chu hasn't only recovered from all his injuries, but has also recovered his strength. Moreover, it seems that he has made a breakthrough in his cultivation. More than one. The most frightening thing isn't that King of Hell Chu has made a breakthrough, it's that King of Hell Chu is a completely different person compared to before. King of Hell Chu has always fought when he could, and fled when he couldn't. But it's completely different this time. King of Hell Chu is besieged in the center. But he's crazily slashing and killing. He doesn't seem to care about the swords and sabers. It seems that his only thought is to kill. It seems that his goal is to kill all of us at all costs. Jing Minghun was startled. Then he sneered in his heart, even if your martial power is sky high, how can you kill 3,000 of us by yourself? He soared and joined the battle. Hundreds of corpses had fallen within a radius of 400 feet around Chu Yang in a short quarter of an hour. Too many of them had been crushed by the Tribulation Sword and were scattered on the ground. The pressure on Chu Yang became unprecedentedly huge once Jing Minghun joined the battle. However, he did his best to hold on, fighting to the death as he charged out. Fortunately, even though he had already fallen into a state of frenzy, he still remembered his original intention, which was to charge out. Get out. Chu Yang and Jing Minghun's sword collided with a loud bang. Jing Minghun was holding his sword with his left hand. Moreover, he couldn't display his full strength with his left hand due to his recent disability. However, his peak king-level expert strength was still much higher than Chu Yang's. The difference between the two sides couldn't be measured. Chu Yang's body shook and he abruptly drew back. Blood spurted out from his nose and mouth and he staggered. 2 bang sounds were heard. It was the sound of 2 revered martial artists of the Golden Horse Riders Department taking advantage of this opportunity to fiercely hit him on the back. Chu Yang felt a chill on his leg with a schwa sound. Then he felt a sharp pain. A sword had slanted across his right leg and left a long and deep cut. Blood was gushing out. Chu Yang let out a loud cry. Suddenly he flew into a rage. His long sword trembled and made a hissing sound. Suddenly he swung his sword in a circle. The first 3 parts of the Calamity Sword and the 12 moves were all sent out at the same time. There was no pause. Then Chu Yang didn't stop there. He launched the 4 sword moves that he had created himself at the same time. Suddenly, a volcano of sword energy erupted within a radius of 300 feet around Chu Yang's body. Countless sword lights poured out, one by one, 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 they spread in all directions with an invincible power. It seemed as if countless demons had suddenly appeared in the sky. Each of them blinked their shining eyes. They were bone-chilling and their murderous auras soared to the sky. A loud bang sound was heard. Everyone wanted to take advantage of Chu Yang's injury. So, hundreds of people surrounded him with a rumbling sound. Everyone attacked with their swords and sabers. But who would have thought that King of Hell Chu would launch a full-blown explosion of sword energy at such a moment? Suddenly, countless people bore the brunt of this attack. Those who were close to him didn't even have time to scream. They didn't even have time to reveal a frightened expression on their faces. They were torn to pieces by the omnipresent sword energy. 200 people died at the same time under this attack. Jing Minghun's facial muscles twitched uncontrollably as he looked at the dismembered limbs and body parts all over the ground. The corners of his eyes were also twitching. What kind of sword technique is this? Even a king-level expert like me can't achieve this kind of power. Fortunately, I didn't go forward. Otherwise, I wouldn't have died here. But I'm afraid that I would have been injured. The entire place was silent. King of Hell Chu's black clothes were stained with blood. His body was slightly swaying, but he was still standing proudly. His eyes were still as cold as before. They were still as cruel as before. His murderous aura was still as before. His sword was in his right hand. It was flashing with a cold light. A large amount of sticky blood flowed from Chu Hengsheng's body onto the sword. Then it slid down to the ground. The sword was spotless, bright and ice-cold. The rest of the people stared blankly at the bloody mess that King of Hell Chu had created with his outburst of sword energy. The corners of their eyes were twitching. Their hearts were filled with fear. Yes, the enemy has suffered serious injuries. He's already swaying. It's obvious that he won't live for long. But no one dares to fight like a cornered beast. If another outburst of sword energy like this happens again, then the lives of 100 or 200 people will be buried in this bottomless pit. But I don't know if I'll be among these 200 people. The sound of the army coming from behind was getting closer and closer. The entire mountain forest seemed to be trembling with the sound of the iron hooves. Even the flames in the mountains and plains seemed to be flickering. It seemed as if they were intimidated by the momentum of the galloping horses. Iron Cloud's reinforcements are about to arrive. Maybe they'll arrive in the next moment. Dripping blood battle technique. Jing Minghun shouted. Everyone secretly curled their lips. King-level expert Jing had shouted the words dripping blood battle technique 7 or 8 times today. But he hadn't rushed forward to use the dripping blood battle technique. Nearly 100 people had already fallen under the urging of Jing Minghun's dripping blood battle technique. 30,000 people were fighting against one person. And 100 of them had fallen. This was an extremely frightening number. Jing Minghun fiercely rushed forward after he finished speaking. He knew that he needed to take the lead this time. After all, the number of casualties just now was too frightening. Moreover, Iron Cloud's reinforcements were already close at hand. I'm afraid that this attack will be our last chance. Everyone rushed forward once again. This was the last attack. Chu Yang's body was weak. His vision had become somewhat blurry. But his blood was still burning hot. It seemed as if his soul was burning at this moment. Chu Yang had rushed out of the sea of flames. He had been besieged by 3,000 people. But he had already rushed out 7,000 feet. This was an unimaginable number. Even if Jing Minghun and Chu Yang had been in the same position, he wouldn't have been able to rush out 7,000 feet like this. However, Chu Yang's oil had finally dried up. He had no strength left after he had released that sword attack. Chu Yang would have left some strength to protect himself if this had happened in the past. But he was in a strange state this time. Even Chu Yang didn't know why he had burst out with all his strength. Jing Minghun's hideous grin was getting closer and closer. Chu Yang suddenly looked up and roared. At this moment, the tip of Calamity's sword suddenly emitted an ice-cold aura. In an instant, Chu Yang's meridians were filled with this cold energy. It was about to erupt. 7 shades cold energy. Chu Yang woke up with a start. He waved his hand and a vast expanse of white cold energy spread out. Frost covered the ground wherever it passed. It was freezing cold. Jing Minghun and the other experts who had surrounded him suddenly felt their bodies freeze. A fast horse rushed out of the bend in the distance. It shouted like a clap of thunder, "Stop!" Its voice was shrill and anxious. It even had a hint of a female voice. 2 people's silhouettes jumped up from their horses. They rushed out like lightning. It seemed as if they were walking in the air. They crossed hundreds of feet in a flash. Then they flashed again and got a lot closer. They floated in the air like shadows. It seemed as if they were in a dream. Jing Minghun finally launched an attack. Countless experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department launched a frenzied bombardment at the last moment. Chu Yang was in the middle of the attack. He didn't hold back any of his strength. He transferred all of his strength to his sword. The 12 moves of the Tribulation Sword suddenly burst out. A storm was set off again. However, it was so cold that it could freeze 1,000 miles this time. It was completely different from the previous attack. Countless screams resounded at the same time. Many experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department lost their lives under this move. They were frozen stiff. Then they turned into chunks of frozen meat and danced in the air. At the same time, close to 300 people lost their lives in this explosion. The surroundings looked like an Azura hell. It was too horrible to look at. Jing Minghun screamed hoarsely. His shoulder, thigh and chest were stabbed. He flew up with blood dripping from his body. He roared in the air, "It's over. Retreat." He hadn't expected that he would suffer such injuries under such a dense siege. He had to leave first. The two people who were rushing over were clearly Tai Butian's shadow bodyguards. He would lose his life if he didn't leave under the siege of these two people. Chu Yang groaned miserably. The enemy had attacked him with all their might. He had been hit by 7 swords, 3 sabers and 1 kick from Jing Minghun. Chu Yang felt as if his internal organs were about to rupture. He was thrown high up in the air and tumbled down. He lost consciousness the moment he was thrown up. 2 silhouettes rushed over at lightning speed and caught Chu Yang in their arms as he fell from the sky. Chapter 369. The Ironclad's army rushed in like a tide. Butian Pavilion's people and the 2 shadow experts joined the army to chase and kill the remaining 2,000 experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department. However, these 2,000 experts weren't mediocre. 500 of them were killed and 30 or 40 were captured. However, the rest of them had already fled without a trace. Jing Minghun was the first to escape. He had already fled far away. Chu Yang was lying unconscious in Tai Butian's arms. Tai Butian felt that Chu Yang's body was getting hotter and hotter even though he was unconscious. In fact, he felt like a stove. The 2 shadow experts' gazes were somewhat evasive as they returned. Tai Butian hurriedly asked as if she had seen her saviors when she saw the 2 shadow experts return. "Uncles, look, what's wrong with him?" The 2 shadow experts had already known what had happened from the mouths of the captives. So, they could have guessed what had happened when they saw Chu Yang's appearance. They couldn't help but sigh and say, "I'm afraid, this man can't be saved." Can't be saved? Tai Butian felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Her body swayed and her vision went dark. She asked, "He's still breathing. Moreover, his pulse is very strong. How can he be saved?" "He's poisoned," the shadow said. He then sighed, "Moreover, there's no antidote for this poison." No antidote? Tai Butian was on the verge of collapse. She weakly asked, "What kind of poison is so overbearing? How? This is the lust poison of a lust dragon. We are in the wilderness. There are no women in the army. It's difficult to even find a village girl here." One of the shadow experts suddenly stopped talking and grimaced in pain. It was another shadow who pinched him fiercely. Lust dragon? Lust poison? However, Tai Butian had already heard it. Her eyes lit up. She thought for a while and said, "Is it the lust dragon whose body will fester and die if it's not detoxified within 5 hours?" One of the 2 shadows lowered his head, and the other one looked around as if he hadn't heard anything. "Is it?" Tai Butian asked angrily. "It's hard to say." One of the shadow experts stammered. Then he said, "But you don't have to do anything for him even if it's true. After all As he spoke he was pinched again. So, he took a step back and didn't say anything else. Tai Butian looked at the other figure with a questioning gaze. "What's going on?" Her expression gradually darkened. "It's his fate that he's in this state." That shadow said, "Moreover, our Iron Cloud already has King of Hell Chu. We don't need to have 2. Besides, this person has always been arrogant and unruly. Besides, the war is imminent. It's really not a good idea to..." Tai Butian's gaze was like water as he looked at Chu Yang's face. The expression on his face was constantly changing. One could tell that he was struggling intensely in his heart. After a long time, he finally gritted his teeth, turned his head and said in a hoarse voice, "Prepare a carriage to send him back." His voice was weak and he seemed to be on the verge of collapse. The 2 shadows heaved a sigh of relief at the same time as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. After exchanging glances, they hurriedly went to carry out the orders. At this time Wu Kuangyun strolled over and stretched his neck to take a look. He couldn't help but shrug his shoulders and laugh. So it's this little bastard. This guy still owes me a huge debt that he hasn't paid back yet. Tai Budian looked at the Dark Knight with a stupefied expression. His face was expressionless. He stood there motionless. It seemed as if the ruler of Iron Cloud had suddenly turned into a wooden sculpture. The carriage arrived and Chu Yang was placed on it. The army then began to move back. Tai Budian followed beside the carriage from beginning to end. He didn't say a word. His expression was one of pain. His teeth were tightly biting his lips until his lower lip turned into tea. The two shadows looked at him worriedly. They didn't leave his side even for an inch. Your Majesty, there's news. Wu Kuangyun held a messenger falcon in his hand. He was sweating profusely as he ran over. There are 3 cavalry troops rushing in our direction at top speed. They're less than 700 miles away from here. How far do we have to go back? Tai Budian asked in a stupefied manner. There are still 350 li left. Wu Kuangyun bluntly said, but most of us are infantry. The enemy is cavalry. Moreover, they've already unleashed their speed. Even if we can go back, we'll still have to organize people to withdraw. Tai Budian understood the underlying meaning of these words. It's not optimistic. The army is under your command. You must return to the slanting valley before the enemy does, no matter what method you use. Then organize people to withdraw into the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Tai Budian made a prompt decision and gave the order. Then, what about you, Your Majesty? Wu Kuangyun was startled. He was startled. Uncle Xing and I will find a way to go back, Tai Budian said. He then stretched out his hand and pointed, leave this man in the carriage behind. You go first. You won't be able to move quickly if you take him with you. No. Wu Kuangyun was startled. Execute the order. Tai Budian looked at him fiercely. You'll be punished for treason if you dare to say another word. Then he comforted him. Don't worry. We'll follow behind the army. We'll follow them if we can. If we can't, I'll have 2 king-level experts by my side. So there won't be any danger. He paused and said, I'll personally explain to Supreme Commander Tai no matter what the situation is this time. You don't need to show up. Wu Kuangyun didn't listen to him no matter what he said. Wu Kuangyun didn't have the guts to leave the emperor behind in the middle of a burning wilderness at such a critical time. You won't go? Tai Buqian's eyes suddenly sharpened. He unsheathed his sword with a schwa sound. The next moment he placed it on his own neck. I'll die here if you don't go. Wu Kuangyun was sweating profusely. His eyes were at a loss. You still won't go? Tai Budian shouted. There was already a bloody mark on his neck. Wu Kuangyun shouted. He was filled with endless grief. Your Majesty, take care. Old Wu is going. He jumped up and mounted his horse. Then he crazily issued orders. The rear army changed to the front army. The entire army sped up. Wu Kuangyun led the cavalry to the front of the army. Hurry back and guard the mountain pass as soon as possible. Then I'll personally come out to meet your Majesty. Then I have no choice but to risk my life. Wu Kuangyun, Iron Cloud Nation is in your hands from this moment on. As long as you guard the heaven-splitting mountain pass, there's still hope. If you can't guard it, then this will be the only time in my life that I, the Emperor of Iron Cloud Nation, will have to pay a high price. Tai Budian muttered in his heart. He recalled that he had acted impulsively for the sake of that person in the carriage. But now his life was hanging by a thread. His body was poisoned. But Tai Budian couldn't help but feel confused as he thought of this. Tai Budian followed the carriage. She wasn't at the rear of the army. Let Wu Kuangyun take the lead in this situation. This is the best choice. Of course I can lead the team. But what about Chu Yang? He can't withstand any more bumps. Moreover, he can't hold on for such a long time. Tai Budian bit his lip. He still had a glimmer of hope in his heart. His eyes were constantly darting back and forth. This place is too desolate. Moreover, we just passed through a big fire. What should I do? What should I do? Time passed little by little. Tai Budian had already followed the army for dozens of miles. The army in front was getting farther and farther away. Their voices were getting softer and softer. Tai Budian suddenly reined in his horse. Then he jumped down. He squatted on the ground. He was motionless. His shoulders were shaking. It seemed he was crying. The two shadows looked at each other. Then they sighed deeply. A muffled groan came from the carriage. The 3 of them turned their heads to look. They saw that the unconscious Chu Yang's body was twitching uncontrollably. His face and the exposed skin on his body had already turned red. He's in great pain. If he wants, I'll give him a quick death, one of the shadows said. Then he walked towards the carriage. Don't you dare! Tai Budian shouted. He jumped up and stood in front of the carriage. His eyes were red. They looked at each other. Tai Buqian's eyes revealed an awe-inspiring determination. He lowered his head after a long time. He said, "Find me a secluded place." Tai Buqian's body suddenly trembled as he said this. You. The two shadows cried out in shock. That's the only way. Tai Budian smiled sadly. But Icy Heart Jade Bone, one of the shadows said anxiously, what will happen? You will be beaten to death by your master. Icy Heart Jade Bone, Tai Budian smiled indifferently. He said, if he's no longer here? Who will I guard my icy heart for? Who will I guard my jade bone for? He smiled faintly, yet somewhat perplexedly and said, as for master, could it be that I can still be her disciple in this lifetime? The two shadows were speechless. Tai Shiqing only had Tai Budian as his only descendant. He was now the ruler of Iron Cloud Nation. How could he still be mother's disciple? But, it's not worth it. One of the shadows was anxious. He doesn't even know about your life, and, what does it have to do with whether he knows or not? Tai Budian smiled. This has nothing to do with him. Can you? The two shadows were tongue-tied. Can I still have a child with him? Tai Budian smiled sadly. It's because he doesn't know anything that there's less entanglement. Over. The shadows were speechless. With Tai Buqian's status, it was impossible. Since that's the case, what does it matter? Tai Budian said indifferently, this is my business. It has nothing to do with him, and it has nothing to do with you, and it has nothing to do with my master. There was a resolute look on his face. It's my business. It's my business alone. He turned around and looked at the two shadows sadly. After the struggle for the lower three heavens is over, whether it succeeds or not, he's going to leave. Once he leaves, we may never see each other again. Just let me have these memories in my life, okay? Chapter 370. Tai Budian turned around and looked at the flames that were still burning around her. She said slowly, in my entire life, when I was a baby, perhaps I had experienced joy before. But I have no memories of it. Ever since father was injured, I've had a heavy burden on my shoulders. I've never experienced any joy, nor have I had any friends. I've also never had anyone that I liked, much less any vows of unconditional love. That kind of deep love, that kind of feeling of deep love. Ever since I was born, I've been alone. Other girls can still admire flowers, plant grass, and mourn over the pain of spring as the joy of their boudoir. As for me, I can't even think about it. What has accompanied me from the beginning to the end has been a ruthless and merciless path, the path of an emperor. As father's only flesh and blood, this is my responsibility and I can't shirk it. But who would have thought that even if I were to rule the world, I would still be an ordinary girl? I have my own dreams too. But other people's dreams have a chance to come true, but mine has never. It's simply impossible. When I'm under pressure, I also want a shoulder to lean on and an embrace to make me cry. But I can only persevere and face all the cruelty and coldness with a fearless attitude. Yes, this is my responsibility. But, unknowingly, Tai Buqian's face was already filled with tears. But, to put all of this on me, to make me, a weak girl, face the hardships of life, to control this secret so tightly. Moreover, it's a secret that has no end. Facing a hopeless future, to hide all of my youth behind a mask until I grow old. Don't you think this is too cruel? Don't you think this is too cruel? Tai Budian said hoarsely. The two figures sighed sadly and looked at each other speechlessly. But today I want to save him. Even if I have to give up everything, I have to save him. And even if I don't get anything in return after giving up all this, I'm willing to let this dream disappear without a trace. I'll only be willful this once. I'll just be willful this once. Tai Budian murmured, but I only hope that you will never tell him. We can never let him know. So this is my matter alone. Under the illumination of the firelight, two clear streaks of tears streamed down his face. It's just a pity that your icy heart jade bone divine art is about to advance further. Shadow looked up at the sky and sighed. That's what your master said, she'll come to pick you up. Ha! Perhaps by the time she came. Tai Budian looked at the mountain full of fire in the dark night and said, the world has already changed. Then he smiled, Isn't this mountain of fire more beautiful than the most beautiful candlelight in the world? His eyes flashed with a trace of shyness and a trace of sweetness. Perhaps this time, he thought of something he would never get, the pair of red candles on the beautiful wedding night. At this moment, his eyes were filled with confusion, yet they were also filled with the sweetness of fantasy. Chu Yang felt sore all over his body when he woke up. But there was also an indescribable carefree feeling in his body. He groaned and sat up. Using all the strength in his body, he managed to half sit up. At this time he discovered that his body was swaying as if he was on a moving carriage? Was it Iron Cloud's carriage or Great Zhao's carriage? Chu Yang was puzzled. Looking at the soft bedding and the soft quilt covering his body, he knew that if the people of Great Zhao caught him, they wouldn't give him such preferential treatment. "You're awake." A voice came from outside, indifferent and dignified. Then the curtain of the carriage lifted and Tai Budian floated in. An ordinary person could get on the carriage with a single step, but Tai Budian, an emperor with a certain level of martial arts, actually floated in using her lightness skill. "What are you showing off in front of me?" Chu Yang couldn't help but want to laugh. He said weakly, "Why are you here?" Tai Buqian's face was a little yellow, and her body seemed very tired. She sat down opposite Chu Yang, but frowned slightly, revealing a trace of pain between her brows. She said lightly, "You don't need to know why I'm here. I only want to ask you, you've slept for a day and a night. How do you feel?" Chu Yang was stunned. This tone was actually a kind of superior tone. Moreover, there was a natural coldness in her voice that kept people 1,000 miles away. He couldn't help but be shocked. He looked up and asked in surprise, "What's wrong with you?" "I've been under a lot of pressure these days." Tai Budian looked at him for a while, her eyes expressionless. Then she moved her gaze away and said, "The flames of war have been lit. Great Zhao's army is pressing on the border. Fortunately you came back at this time. Perhaps you can share some of my burden." Chu Yang looked at Tai Budian with a sharp gaze. He clearly felt that there was something wrong with Tai Budian today. He seemed to be deliberately distancing the two of them. "Could something have happened while I was away?" Chu Yang thought and said lightly, "It's just that my ability is limited. I'm afraid I may not be able to help much." He had risked his life for Iron Cloud. Now the Emperor of Iron Cloud was actually so cold to him. Chu Yang's tone was a little cold. "Minister Chu." Tai Buqian's eyes drifted and looked at him. Then she looked away and said, "But Minister Chu will still help me, won't you?" Chu Yang suddenly felt a little suffocated. He chuckled and said, "Of course. I will definitely do what I say." When he finished, Chu Yang closed his eyes. It was obvious that he didn't want to talk to her anymore. What could he say to an arrogant emperor? Tai Budian would never lower his head to him, but it was even more impossible for him to lower his head to her. Chu Yang rarely showed his arrogance, but the pride in his bones was something that no one in this world could reach. Since Tai Budian was so cold, he would definitely not use his warm face to kiss her cold butt. "That's good." Tai Budian led the way and smiled. Her sharp gaze circled around Chu Yang's face. She seemed to want to say something, but she held back and said coldly, "Recuperate well." As she spoke, she suddenly coughed a few times uncontrollably. Her eyebrows furrowed even tighter. The pained expression on her face became more and more obvious, as if she was enduring great pain. But Chu Yang's eyes were closed and he didn't see it. Then Tai Budian got off the carriage. The sound of curtains being lifted sounded. Then Tai Budian got on another carriage. It turned out that there were two carriages. Chu Yang snorted in his heart. This emperor was really getting more and more arrogant. He clearly saw thousands of troops coming to rescue him. In such an urgent situation he actually came in a carriage. He really knew how to be comfortable. Sure enough, after one became an emperor, one's temperament and habits would change. The previous Budian was too diligent. Perhaps he would never return? Thinking of this, Chu Yang suddenly felt bored to death. If it wasn't to reverse fate and save Qingwu, he really wanted to leave just like that. When the battle is over and Diwu Qingru is defeated, Chu Yang will definitely not stay here for another day. The carriage moved forward slowly. The journey seemed to be getting more and more difficult. Chu Yang slowly felt that the surroundings were a little too quiet. Other than Tai Buqian's carriage beside him, there seemed to be no other sound. Chu Yang circulated his qi and adjusted his breathing. When he thought of that earth-shattering final attack, he still felt a lingering fear. He actually survived such an attack. Even he felt that it was inconceivable. He called the sword spirit a few times, but this time something strange happened. No matter how he called, the sword spirit didn't respond. He didn't know that Chu Yang had also erupted with unprecedented power in that final attack. He had killed nearly 300 people in one fell swoop. However, the other party clearly knew that this was their last chance. Almost everyone was fighting with their lives on the line. More than 1,000 people from all directions simultaneously attacked Chu Yang with their greatest strength. How could Chu Yang withstand such an attack by himself? This was a head-on attack. There was no room for any tricks. At the final juncture, when Chu Yang's body was about to be beaten into minced meat, the sword spirit finally couldn't control himself and rushed out. He took over Chu Yang's body, and used all the strength of his spirit body to resist this earth-shattering fatal attack for Chu Yang. But after that, the sword spirit also exhausted all its strength and fell into a deep sleep. At that time, Chu Yang had already fallen into a coma. So, the sword spirit didn't even have time to tell him. Although the sword spirit knew that Chu Yang's body had a hidden problem that needed to be solved urgently, it was powerless to do anything. Moreover, it couldn't do anything even if it had been awake. Later, Chu Yang also fell into a coma. So, everything could only be left to fate. Chu Yang looked at his body. His meridians had almost been destroyed. He bitterly smiled and summoned the sword spirit. He took out an incomplete version of the heavy pill and swallowed it. This heavy pill wasn't the complete version of the mysterious iced jade ointment. However, it was still a first-class healing medicine in the world. Chu Yang's injuries looked serious. However, they were still within the range of treatment. After taking the heavy pill, Chu Yang felt that his body was slowly regaining strength in less than half an hour. The injuries in his body were also slowly getting better. Another 2 hours passed. He finally felt that he could move. He sat up and breathed in and out a few times. Then he felt that his whole body was relaxed. Moreover, it seemed as if some kind of shackle that had been binding him had suddenly broken. He felt as if his body was floating. Chu Yang tried to raise his energy. Then he suddenly opened his eyes wide in shock. He didn't know when his spiritual power had broken through the bottleneck. It had reached the first grade of king level. First grade of Sword King. What's going on? How did I break through when I was injured? Chapter 371. Chu Yang couldn't sit still as he thought of this. He lifted the curtain of the carriage and was about to jump down. However, he was shocked as soon as he lifted the curtain. He almost couldn't believe his eyes. I'm clearly still in the mountain range of Beyond the Heavens sect. But where's the army? The army that came last night was clearly Ironcloud's army. How come there's not even a shadow of a person? Am I dreaming? Smoke was still coming out of the mountain forest all around. There were still some weak flames in some places. Beside him, there was another carriage that looked very simple and crude. There were 2 carriages and 2 coachmen. Other than that, there was only himself and Tai Budian sitting in the carriage. There were 4 people in total. They didn't make a sound. Only the sound of the wheels was heard. What's going on? Chu Yang couldn't help but ask, why are there only these few people? The 2 coachmen acted as if the world owed them 800 strings of coins. They kept a straight face and didn't speak. They just drove the carriage forward as if they didn't hear Chu Yang's question. I'm asking you a question. Chu Yang said angrily. Shut up. A reprimand was heard. King of Hell Chu was a little dumbfounded because this was what his coachman had said. Since when are coachmen so awesome? Chu Yang's body floated out of the carriage and landed on the roof of the carriage. He looked down from above and became even more certain of his guess. Big tree is gone. Chu Yang shrank back and stuck out his tongue as he looked at the 2 coachmen. If I'm not wrong, these 2 should be the 2 shadow experts who are always by Tai Butian's side. They're like shadows. Damn. No wonder they're so stupid. This was the first time that Chu Yang had seen the true appearances of these 2 shadows. He saw that these 2 people looked as if they had been cast from the same mold. They were tall and thin and wore gray robes. In fact, it seemed as if a piece of cloth had been hung from a bamboo pole. Their cheekbones were high and their eye sockets were deep. They didn't have a single ounce of meat on their bodies. They were about 50 years old. He didn't speak, but this shadow didn't let him go. You're fine? You can jump? You're recovering very fast. You're really lucky. No matter how Chu Yang listened to these words, it sounded a little strange. It seemed that they had a lot of complaints. He could not help but ask, what's wrong? What happened? In order to save you, His Majesty sent an army of 500,000 soldiers out of the mountain pass to provide support. The mountain pass is currently being besieged by an enemy army of more than 1 million soldiers. Everyone has gone back to provide support. Only the few of us are left. Do you understand now? What? Chu Yang was shocked. He didn't expect that Tai Budian would actually take such a huge risk for him. This was practically putting the fate of the entire country on the same scale as his, and his weight was obviously heavier. This was a huge risk. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt a little touched. He thought to himself, no wonder Tai Budian's expression is so foul. So that's why. Because of one person, the entire Ironclad nation was in danger. No matter who it was, they would not be in a good mood. The two Ingzins were also very surprised. Although Chu Yang's aphrodisiac had been removed, it was impossible for him to be alive and kicking right now. When he was unconscious, both of them had checked his pulse. His injuries were so serious that they couldn't be any worse. How could he be able to walk and jump now? Moreover, he didn't seem to have any major problems. His vitality was too strong, wasn't it? On the other side, Tai Budian didn't move at all. She seemed to have fallen asleep. The three of them didn't know that Tai Budian was lying in the carriage. She was in so much pain that she was sweating all over. Her face was pale and her clothes were almost soaked with sweat. Chu Yang's aphrodisiac was extremely overbearing. Tai Budian was still a virgin. How could she withstand such a high intensity and almost cruel ravaging? When the aphrodisiac was removed, Tai Budian died countless times. In the end, she was almost on her last breath. It was also thanks to Chu Yang's lack of consciousness that his actions were only subconscious. Most of the time, it was Tai Budian who took the lead. That was why she didn't really die. Now Tai Budian still felt like her whole body was being torn apart. She was in intense pain. It was already not easy for her to be able to resist the urge to look at Chu Yang. Minister Chu, this old man is much older than you. There's something I don't know if I should say? Ing said. Elder, please speak. There's no harm in it, Chu Yang said with a smile. Minister Chu is so young. I don't think you have a wife yet. Although it was a question, Ying's tone was certain. I don't have a wife yet, Chu Yang said frankly. Yes, if there's a woman who loves Minister Chu wholeheartedly and is willing to give up everything for him, would Minister Chu be moved? There was a hint of grievance in Ying's voice. He said, I'll be the matchmaker, Ing. Tai Budian's somewhat angry voice came from the carriage beside them. How can Minister Chu's marriage be forced by others? Ing touched his beard embarrassedly and didn't say anything. I already have someone I love. Chu Yang knew what he was getting at. He rejected him cleanly. I'm very fond of her and I love her very much. I don't want to be a second person in my life. Ing had already been stopped by Tai Budian. He didn't want to say anything else. But when he heard this, he flew into a rage. He couldn't control his temper anymore. He said sternly, Are you indifferent when others have sacrificed so much for you? No matter how much others have sacrificed for me, it's not a reason for me to have a change of heart, right? Chu Yang looked at this somewhat angry old man with amusement. He asked with interest, I just don't know, who is this person you're talking about? Ing snorted angrily. He turned his head and ignored Chu Yang. Chu Yang's mind turned at lightning speed. He had an idea. This old man was probably talking about Wu Qianqian. After all, Wu Qianqian had been in contact with these two old men since CC wasn't an Ironclad. It seemed that these two old men were matchmaking for Wu Qianqian today. Thinking of Wu Qianqian, Chu Yang couldn't help but sigh deeply. Wu Qianqian was deeply in love with him. How could he not know? However, his entire life was for Qingwu. No matter what others did, the person he couldn't let down was Imo Qingwu. Wu Qianqian was naturally a peerless beauty. Moreover, she had an orchid heart, outstanding talent and resourceful mind. Therefore, she was one of the top choices at this time. However, Chu Yang only had Imo Qingwu in his heart. The huge regret from his previous life had tied Chu Yang's heart into a dead knot. Other than Imo Qingwu, there was probably no one else in this world who could undo Chu Yang's love knot. From the beginning to the end, Chu Yang had never thought about what kind of ending he would have with Wu Qianqian. He didn't even have such thoughts. As for other people, they probably wouldn't. In the other carriage, Tai Budian's expression was dim. She sighed deeply with self-pity. Sure enough, Chu Yang had someone in his heart. Since that was the case, wouldn't it be best to bury this matter? Besides, even if Chu Yang didn't have anyone in his heart, what could she do? With her identity as the ruler of a country, could she still marry him? Tai Budian comforted herself. She seemed to have thought it through and made up her mind. However, 2 strings of tears quietly dripped down from her eyes, soaking the pillow. She gently reached out and wiped the tears away. However, the tears quickly gushed out again as if they would never stop. Let me cry just once. While he's still beside me. Although he didn't know, there was another indescribable silence. In this place of silence, Chu Yang clearly felt that it was full of oppression, as if it would explode at any moment. After a long time, Tai Butian's somewhat tired voice came from the side. Minister Chu's body recovers really quickly. Chu Yang chuckled and said, "It's just that my skin is rough and my flesh is thick." Since the misunderstanding between him and Tai Butian had been cleared, Chu Yang naturally wouldn't continue to treat her coldly. "Last night, I threw Minister Chu's black clothes into the fire and burned them," Tai Butian said slowly. "However, after burning them, I felt that something was wrong. Minister Chu, could there be something in your clothes that you can't let go of? Or a very important secret?" "Something that I can't let go of? A very important secret?" Chu Yang was startled. He scratched his head in confusion and asked, "What does your Majesty mean?" "Oh, since there's nothing, I can rest assured." Tai Butian smiled and said, "Because when the clothes were burned, there was clearly a smell of roasted hair. If it was only from Minister Chu's body, there wouldn't be so much smell." Yuanqing worried too much. Chu Yang smiled and said, "Your Majesty may not know, but my clothes were stained with too much blood, or perhaps there were pieces of flesh and blood from the enemy's corpse. Naturally, there would be that smell after burning them." Tai Butian smiled and said, Or maybe I haven't experienced it before." She was puzzled. The smell of burning flesh and blood was not the same as that. However, she didn't continue the discussion on this topic. "Minister Chu, you and I are not monarch and minister, nor are we colleagues." Tai Butian said carefully, "Minister Chu has a great future and will definitely not be limited to this small lower three heavens. Then, dare I ask in Minister Chu's heart, what kind of position am I, the Emperor of Iron Cloud?" Tai Butian spoke slowly. But there was a faint sense of urgency in his tone. "Haha." Chu Yang touched his nose awkwardly and smiled. He felt that this question was really not easy to answer. Tai Butian waited quietly and didn't urge him. "Your Majesty and I really don't know what to say." Chu Yang smiled calmly and said, "From the beginning, you and I were destined to have a cooperative relationship. Our goal was to defeat Diwu Qingro, and the relationship between us was also built on this foundation. However, I, Chu Yang, still admire your Majesty's character. During this period of time, I have cooperated with your Majesty countless times. I also have a good impression of your Majesty. In fact, we have a tacit understanding." Chu Yang deliberated and said, "In such a situation, I don't dare to say that we are brothers. But I can say that we are friends." Chapter 372. Friend? Tai Butian's voice was very soft, as if she was at a loss. Then she smiled and said, "To have a friend like Minister Chu in this life, it is indeed unforgettable. In the history of emperors, who is lucky enough to have a true friend in their life?" "Your Majesty is right." Chu Yang laughed and said, "Actually, not only emperors, even ordinary people will not have many true friends in their life. Some people will not treat them with sincerity in their life, and they will not treat anyone with sincerity in their life. Such people are more suitable than emperors." Haha. Tai Butian laughed sincerely and said, "From what Minister Chu means, Yuanqing is very pitiful." "Very pitiful indeed." Chu Yang said seriously, "It is lonely at the top. Emperors are like this. When they sit on the throne and accept the glory of being the supreme ruler of the world, they are also destined to be lonely for the rest of their lives." As soon as these words were spoken, Tai Butian suddenly fell silent. After a long time, a long sigh could be heard coming from the carriage. A soft, almost inaudible voice said faintly, "The Emperor is lonely. G family, friend, haha." The two figures also sighed respectively. It was not clear whether they were sighing for themselves or for others. In short, the meaning was complicated and difficult to understand. In the other carriage, Tai Butian looked at the roof of the carriage with lifeless eyes. For a long time her eyes did not move. "Friend. Friend. Not bad. You fought hundreds of battles for me. You came up with hundreds of plans for me. You killed madly for me. You risked your life for me. Yuanqing treats me as a friend. I am deeply in love for you. I am afraid for you. I am willing to do anything for you. I am willing to give up my chastity for you. I will do everything I can for you. I will give up everything I have, even the country. Yuanqing, we are friends." Tai Butian's heart was indescribable. At this moment she actually had the urge to cry out loud. The bitterness and despair in her heart made her want to pull out her sword immediately and kill herself in front of Chu Yang. But she still controlled her almost uncontrollable emotions. She took deep breaths. Tears flowed down quietly like broken pearls. Sigh, why is she crying again? Didn't I say not to cry again? Why are you crying now? Tai Budian, you're so useless. Friends? Just friends? Chu Yang's words had set the tone between the two of them. Finally Tai Budian smiled. Friends aren't bad either. Just as he had said, how many emperors from ancient times to the present had friends? As Chu Yang had said, how many true friends could there be among ordinary people? Haha, we'll probably have to wait until the battle at the mountain pass is over before we can return to the mountain pass. There's still a long way to go. Tai Butian smiled and said, Minister Chu, why don't you tell me about yourself? Take it as a way to relieve the loneliness of this journey. How about it? Journey? Chu Yang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Your Majesty is really relaxed. Don't tell me that your Majesty doesn't care about this war that concerns the fate of the two nations at all? Even if I do, what can I do? Tai Budian smiled and said, I've already done what I should. As for the rest, whether I win or lose, I can accept it. When I was anxious, it was the same. When I wasn't anxious, it was still the same. Why do I have to take it to heart? Your Majesty is really open-minded. Chu Yang was in awe. As an emperor, it was really commendable to have such a breadth of mind. Ha ha ha. Tai Budian laughed very happily. Your Majesty, what do you want to hear? Chu Yang asked. Since we're friends, it's not very appropriate for Minister Chu to keep calling me Your Majesty. Tai Budian smiled and said. Both of them didn't notice that a strange expression would appear on the faces of the two shadows every time Tai Butian and Chu Yang would say the word friend. In fact, they would have a very complicated and indescribable look in their eyes. But Your Majesty still keeps calling me Minister Chu. Chu Yang laughed and said, Since we're friends, what does it matter what I call you? What does Your Majesty want me to call you? Tai Budian was speechless. Yes, what does Your Majesty want me to call you? Budian? Iron Brother? Isn't this rubbing salt on my wound? Does Your Majesty want Chu Yang to call me Little Tian Tian, the special name used by my father before I was 3 years old? That's even more impossible. Then what should I call him? Brother Chu? Taiwan, Yang Yang? He probably won't agree to it either. Chu Yang? That's even more impossible. Let's just call it that. Aha, Minister Chu is right. Between friends, there's no need to care about the name. Tai Budian laughed heartily. I'm very interested in the person that Minister Chu can't forget. Minister Chu, why don't you tell me about it? Chu Yang was a little dumbfounded. To be able to make someone like Minister Chu fall in love with her wholeheartedly, Minister Chu would only take one out of the 3,000 beauties in the world of mortals. In fact, he usually keeps himself clean and never gets involved with women. He doesn't even dare to provoke any feelings. Tai Butian's voice was very strange. It was hard to tell what it meant. He would rather hide his handsome looks with a ferocious mask. In this life, he's only for one person. I'm really curious. What kind of amazing woman can make Minister Chu fall in love with her so deeply? Tai Budian asked. Her. Chu Yang thought of Mo Qingwu and couldn't help but be fascinated. The corners of his mouth also revealed a smile that was either bitter or sweet. It's hard to say, Chu Yang said softly. Tell me about it. Tai Budian was full of interest. She added in her heart, I want to know where I'm lacking in comparison to her. She's a very silly girl. Chu Yang thought for a while and finally said, and she's also very naive. She always gives to me without any complaints or regrets. She's never asked for anything. This sentence made Tai Butian's heart tremble. When I have to be with her, I can do whatever I want. I don't consider what she'll think at all. But she's never stopped me either. She only silently supported and encouraged me. There was even one time when I got bored and asked her to leave. She didn't say anything either. She just stood in a corner and watched me quietly waiting for me. There's still such a silly girl nowadays. Tai Budian couldn't help but sigh in her heart. Her health wasn't good. She was injured when she was young. She was destined to not have much success in this life. So she always felt inferior when she was with me. Chu Yang subconsciously checked the heavy pill carved on the hilt of the tribulation sword. He said, and I was just so muddle-headed. I didn't know regret. Finally, one day she left me. Only then did I know how important she was. Without her, my life was completely bleak. At that time, I was obsessed with the sword. But when she was about to leave me, she summoned all her courage and told me with all the grievances and anger she felt when she was with me. Chu Yang, I'm prettier than the sword. Speaking till here, Chu Yang's heart ached. He thought of that heart-wrenching afternoon in his previous life. The setting sun was like blood, the purple bamboo was like the sea. Mo Qingwu was dressed in red, lying in his arms, bathed in blood. She said, "Chuyang, I'm prettier than the sword," with her dying breath. His heart suddenly convulsed in pain. Every time he thought of this sentence, he always felt that it was filled with a different kind of sadness. It was as if it could give him a different feeling every time. Tai Budian was silent. As if she could feel the pain in Chuyang's heart, she sighed in her heart. "Recently I finally found her again. This time I swear that I'll treat her well. I'll do everything I can and let her be the most blessed woman in the whole heaven." Chuyang said softly. "She's really lucky to have met someone as determined as you," Tai Budian said softly. Her heart ached endlessly. She was very envious of this girl who was lucky enough to have all of Chuyang's love. She was also very jealous. "It should be said that meeting her is also my luck, the greatest blessing." Chuyang smiled happily. Thinking of how he healed Qingwu's injuries and let her live a happy and worry-free life, he was full of blessings. "Yes, you're all lucky. How does she look? She must be very beautiful, right?" Tai Budian asked. "Outstanding beauty. Peerless in her generation. Devastatingly beautiful." Chuyang said with certainty, "I've never seen a girl more beautiful than her in this world." He thought for a while and said, "Her style, her elegance, her temperament, her looks, her figure, her temperament, any aspect of her is unparalleled in the world." Chuyang took a deep breath and said, "Her beauty doesn't belong to this world." This time Tai Budian was even more silent. In the carriage, Tai Budian looked at her lower body with a somewhat helpless gaze. The wound there seemed to be fresh blood flowing out again. But the pain now was far from being comparable to the pain in her heart. While Chuyang was praising his sweetheart non-stop, he was completely unaware that Tai Butian's heart had already broken into pieces in despair. Chuyang's face was smiling and his heart was filled with happiness. The battle has already begun. After defeating Diwu Qingru, I'll go to the third heaven to meet Qingwu. Suddenly he felt something strange beside him. His gaze turned sideways and he suddenly realized that on the two carriages, there were two shadows looking at him furiously. The anger in their eyes seemed to want to swallow Chuyang whole. "In that case I'm even more curious." Tai Budian forced a smile and said, "When can Minister Chu bring her along and let me see this unparalleled beauty in this world?" She smiled and said, "Chanshan is already an unparalleled beauty. I really want to see what a girl more beautiful than Chanshan looks like." Chapter 373. Chuyang wisely chose to evade this question. If he didn't evade it, he would really offend her. For a long time Tai Budian didn't speak. Instead she laughed softly. Her laughter carried an unfathomable flavor. She said, "Minister Chu, Miss Chen Chen is deeply in love with you? Don't tell me you're not moved at all?" Chuyang pondered for a long time. Then he smiled bitterly. Then he replied seriously, "Your Majesty, I don't want to repeat this question. You and I are the same. We're both men. Since we're men, we have responsibilities that we can't shirk. You have your responsibilities. That is the road to the emperor in the world. And I have my responsibilities. My responsibilities are the responsibilities of a little man. Chen Chen is a beautiful flower. She's talented and knowledgeable. She's also very infatuated with me. How can I not be moved? Since I'm a man, I have lust. I think you won't deny this point. But, do I have to let down another person I love if I'm moved?" Chuyang smiled bitterly and said, "Let time smooth over everything." He paused and said, "Your Majesty, you're also a man. You should understand my feelings." Tai Budian was silent for a long time. Then she finally smiled bitterly and sighed. "I'm also a man," Chuyang frowned. The emotions revealed in Tai Butian's words were so helpless and sorrowful. Could it be that he also had a girl whom he loved painstakingly but couldn't get? Suddenly he understood. It seemed that Tai Budian liked Wu Chen, but Wu Chen liked him. Yes, it must be so. The two shadows really wanted to block their ears. They didn't want to listen to Chuyang anymore. Hearing this guy say "you're also a man," and "you should understand me," they suddenly felt that it was funny and sad. Yes, as a man, being responsible is a good thing. It's also a virtue. But do you know how many people you've hurt? Who have you hurt? Do you know that you're speaking so confidently right now? She's a woman, and she's a woman who's given everything to you but can't ask for anything in return. An infatuated woman? Even until the day you die, you might not know that there was such a woman in this world in your life. For you, he destroyed his cultivation, lost his virginity, lost his future in martial arts, and almost lost everything. But you only treated him as a brother and a friend. How cruel was that? Yet how helpless was that? Let time annihilate everything. Tai Budian repeated this in a low voice, but she was sighing in her heart. Time can annihilate everything. This saying is true. However, there was one thing that no amount of time could erase, and that was a woman's first time falling in love, her first time falling in love. Moreover, it was a sacrifice without any complaints or regrets. Whether it was Wu Qianqian or himself, even when Hua Banban was about to die 100 years later, they would not forget what happened during this period of time. Naturally, he wouldn't forget about a certain talented person who had appeared out of nowhere like a shooting star and changed the situation of the world. They were in love, but they were destined to never be together. The autumn wind sets the sun, and the sky is about to faint. After the vicissitudes of life, I'm alone in my thoughts. I sigh that heroes have failed me, and my daughter's heart is full of twists and turns. Tai Budian looked at the setting sun and the impending darkness on the earth. She couldn't help but sigh softly and emotionally. Then she couldn't help but sigh softly again. She was extremely disappointed. Chu Yang thought that she was talking about Wu Qianqian and was speechless for a moment. Then they fell silent. Only the two figures sighed as they drove the carriage. Their sighs were filled with sorrow and helplessness. They lamented her misfortune and were angry at her failure to fight. The two of them could be said to have watched this girl grow up since she was a child, and both of them were extremely heartbroken. Oh heavens, please open your eyes. Even if you just give this poor girl a little bit of happiness, a little bit of comfort, that's fine too. I don't ask for much, just a little bit of comfort. Can I get it? In her life, she seemed to be in a high position and had a noble background. But in reality, she had never received any happiness. Not even a truly happy smile. Not even once. Tai Budian curled up in the carriage. As they got down the carriage in silence, she felt more and more unbearable pain. The pain in her lower abdomen was so painful that she clenched her teeth and trembled. But she couldn't make a single sound. Beads of sweat the size of soybeans dripped from her forehead. The shadow who was driving the carriage sighed and said, "Minister Chu, I can't say that your injuries were fatal. But they were extremely difficult to heal. But you've recovered to this extent in such a short time after you woke up. So, you must have some miraculous medicine on you, right?" He didn't want to ask Chu Yang, but the elixirs on them weren't very useful for Tai Budian. Seeing Tai Budian in so much pain, he really couldn't bear it. With Chu Yang's recovery rate, he should have some miraculous elixirs. Yes, there are some miraculous elixirs. Although there aren't many, the effects are just passable. Chu Yang didn't know the meaning behind his question, but he still answered patiently. His Majesty was seriously injured in order to save you this time. And our elixirs are all used up. Shadow was silent for a while before he said. When he heard this, Chu Yang immediately recalled Tai Budian's unnatural posture and deathly pale complexion. He thought about how this iron-cloud monarch had almost given up the entire country's advance rescue for him. How could he not be moved? He asked, what kind of injuries did His Majesty suffer? Internal injuries. Shadow said. Internal injuries are easier to treat. Chu Yang nodded. At this time, other than heavy elixirs, he really didn't have any other medicine. After thinking for a while, he took out an incomplete version of heavy elixir and said, Your Majesty, why don't you try my medicine? Okay. Tai Budian was in so much pain that she couldn't do anything about it. She agreed in a low voice and took the medicine. She swallowed it almost without looking at it clearly. Heavy elixirs were the most miraculous medicines in the world. How could their effects be compared to ordinary medicines? Although it was an incomplete version of heavy elixir in this world, other than the complete version of heavy elixir, its medicinal effects were definitely the best in the world. After Tai Budian swallowed it, she only felt that the elixir melted in her mouth. A cool line slid down her throat and into her stomach. Then an icy cold line went through her meridians for a round. Then with a boom it heated up. A copious amount of medicinal effects healed her body almost instantly. The bleeding in her lower body had stopped and the pain was gone. Moreover, her wounds were also healing. Even her spirit suddenly became much more uplifted. The remaining medicinal effects slowly melted into her meridians and actually nourished her body bit by bit. So many years of exhausting exhaustion actually seemed to be completely healed by this elixir. In fact, it was even better. The state of her body and spirit suddenly climbed to the peak at this moment and then maintained it. What kind of medicine is this? It's so miraculous? Tai Budian was shocked. She couldn't believe the effects of this miraculous medicine, as if she was dreaming. Then she sat up and tidied up her body. She felt that her whole body was very relaxed. She couldn't help but be surprised and happy. This was given to me by a strange person. I don't know his name either, Chu Yang said softly. He thought for a while. Tai Buqian's body didn't seem to be in good condition. Moreover, it was chaos now. Almost all of Diwu Qingrou's Golden Horse Riders department had gone to the front line. There were many experts. Tai Buqian was the main target. There would be assassins almost any time and anywhere. It was really impossible to guard against. If something happened and he wasn't around, that would be terrible. So, he took out a piece of purple crystal from the tribulation space and used the tribulation sword to make a jade bottle. After hesitating for a while, he finally took out a complete version of heavy elixir and put it in the jade bottle. There were a total of 3 complete versions of heavy elixir. He gave one to Tai Buqian and there were 2 more left. It was enough. Chu Yang thought to himself, when your father was around, I didn't have one. Even if I had 2, I couldn't take it out. Now I'll compensate you. Then he raised his voice and said, Your Majesty, I have a gift for you. I'm going over now. Without waiting for Tai Buqian's reply, he jumped out of his carriage and climbed into Tai Buqian's carriage. The 2 shadows didn't have any intention of stopping him this time. They let Chu Yang go up. The 2 of them knew very well that no matter what Chu Yang's gift was, it was probably the only thing that could make Tai Buqian happy for a long time. This gift was very important. Although Chu Yang himself didn't know, Tai Buqian was obviously surprised. She looked at him with her eyes wide open. She said stutteringly, What gift? The moment Chu Yang boarded the carriage, he smelled a strange fragrance. It smelled like orchids and fans. He laughed in his heart. This young king is really young? To think that in this kind of environment he would still bring perfume. It's this. Chu Yang turned his wrist and a purple crystal bottle the size of a finger appeared in his palm. A soybean-sized elixir lay quietly in the bottle. Even if one looked through the purple crystal bottle, it was shrouded in a mysterious mist. It shone like starlight as if there was a universe in this purple crystal bottle. What is this? Tai Buqian was a little restrained. Then she calmed herself down and asked. Chu Yang lowered his voice and said seriously, This is a magical elixir. No matter what the situation is in the future, it can save your life. If you're injured, as long as your body isn't separated on the spot, as long as you still have a breath, this elixir can make you recover in an instant. Tai Buqian's mouth opened wide. Even if you don't have a breath, as long as your body is warm, this elixir can make you live. Even if your life is at its end, this elixir can extend your life by at least 30 years. Chapter 374. Tai Buqian looked at the elixirs made by Gai Sanshin and was suddenly enveloped by boundless happiness. In that instant of excitement, his face actually turned a little red. If it wasn't for the support of the miraculous art of disguise, he would have been dead already. At this moment he would probably be blushing like a little girl. He was satisfied. He was really satisfied. Although this elixir might not be as miraculous as Chu Yang said, although Chu Yang didn't know what he had done for him, everything was worth it. Because the most important thing was this thought. No, I can't accept it. Tai Buqian's eyes were a little red. After thinking for a while, he still rejected it. He looked up at Chu Yang seriously. Minister Chu, in the lower 3 heavens you can live a life of luxury. There may not be any difficulties in your life. But if you go to the lower 3 heavens, every step will be dangerous. The martial world is dangerous and dangerous. Kai Shao needs this the most. Tai Buqian looked at Chu Yang steadily. You keep it. It's more useful than me. Chu Yang's heart warmed. He blinked and said, I still have. Tai Buqian stared at him for a while. Seeing the serious look in his eyes, she knew that he wasn't lying. She finally smiled and gently took the purple crystal bottle from Chu Yang's palm. She slowly clenched her fist and put it down. Smiling, she said, Since that's the case, I'll accept it. Yes, it's only right. Chu Yang smiled warmly. He didn't notice that Tai Buqian's body was trembling slightly. It was as if the most tender part of her heart was gently touched and trembling. Her expression was calm, but one of her hands had never let go of the purple crystal bottle since she took it. She used so much force that her knuckles turned white. Chu Yang smiled and said, Then I'll go over. Okay. Tai Buqian maintained her composure with difficulty. Chu Yang smiled and stood up. He opened the curtain and jumped out. Tai Buqian sat quietly with her head lowered. A happy smile appeared at the corners of her mouth. Actually, it's not like I can't get anything. After a long time, she held the purple crystal bottle in front of her eyes and looked at it carefully. Her eyes were full of tenderness. It was as if she could never get enough of this purple crystal bottle. Then, she held the bottle tightly against her chest. letting the purple crystal bottle feel her body temperature. She didn't move for a long time. Chu Yang had carved this purple crystal bottle into a work of art. It was extremely beautiful. However, what Tai Budian valued was not this kind of beauty. After a long time, Tai Butian put down the purple crystal bottle. Then he put his hands behind his neck and untied a small object. It was a strange jade tablet. Then Tai Budian picked up a small mirror. As soon as this jade tablet left her body, a dense radiance flashed. Tai Budian, who was originally a handsome young man full of heroic spirit, suddenly turned into a beautiful woman. As it turned out, her disguise was not a disguise, but the jade rock's effect. He just didn't know what it was. Tai Budian quietly looked at the devastatingly beautiful face in the mirror for a while. Then she let out a bitter laugh and said in a low voice, "In this lifetime, this face. I'm afraid no one will be able to see it, right?" Then she wrapped the purple crystal bottle with a tough silk thread and tied a dead knot. She hung it around her neck. Then she untied her underwear and let this purple crystal bottle quietly stick to her most private part, sticking close to her delicate skin. "Stay with me. Stay with me for the rest of my life. We'll be very, very good." Tai Budian looked at herself in the mirror, at the faintly discernible purple spot on her chest, and said softly. A teardrop fell gently. Tai Butian's hand trembled a little. However, she still put the small jade tablet back on slowly and resolutely. The radiance changed. That short-lived beauty disappeared without a trace. What replaced it was an emperor with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He looked down on the world and held the world in his hands. Tai Budian. The transmogrification effect of this jade tablet actually changed Tai Butian's temperament, skin color, appearance and so on. Ever since she received that heavy pill, Tai Budian seemed to have untied the knot in her heart. Or rather, she had tied a dead knot in her heart. From then on, the events of this day and night would remain in her memory. I am Tai Budian, the Emperor of Iron Cloud Nation. The Emperor of a generation. I will ascend the 4 seas and rule the world. The last ray of light fell from the horizon. The boundless darkness suddenly swept over and descended upon the earth. Since Tai Budian and Chu Yang's injuries had already healed, they were worried about the battle. The 4 of them naturally had to speed up their journey. They simply abandoned the carriage and moved lightly. Taking advantage of the darkness, they rushed forward for a while. The 4 of them used their lightness techniques and carried Tai Budian along. Chu Yang rushed out with a swoosh sound. His body movement was agile and confident. He leapt out like a wisp of green smoke and covered a distance of 70 feet. Moreover, his body swayed slightly in the air without borrowing any force. Then he gently extended his hand and swept across the ground with a swoosh sound. And a fat hair appeared in his hand. Then, his eyes flashed as if he had discovered something. He didn't land on the ground. Instead, he strangely turned around and caught 2 pheasants in the weeds behind the rocks by the roadside. Then he gently landed on the ground. The 2 shadows opened their eyes wide as if they had seen a ghost. They looked at Chu Yang. Their eyes were full of disbelief. "What's wrong?" Chu Yang carried the hare and the 2 pheasants. He smiled and said, "I'm afraid these aren't enough for our meal. Fortunately, I have some dry food here." The 2 shadows didn't care about whether they had enough to eat or not. They only opened their eyes wide and asked, "You're a king-level expert now?" When these words came out, even Tai Budian opened her eyes wide and looked at Chu Yang. King-level expert. Qing Xian was 17 years old when she met Chu Yang in Lu Dan. She had repeated her grade. Chu Yang has already become a king-level expert in just 1 year's time. This is too fake? I'm ashamed. I'm only a first-grade king-level expert, Chu Yang said modestly. The 2 shadows looked at each other. They were speechless. Martial warrior level, martial artist level, martial teacher level, martial great master level, martial honored sect. King level expert. This bastard had crossed more than 40 levels in 1 year. And he still shyly said, "I'm ashamed. I'm only a first-grade king level expert." Only? Ashamed your ass. Only your ass. You can't hit us like this. The 2 shadows were somewhat sad. The king level was their real cultivation. But they also knew that this was the highest level of cultivation in their lives. They were already 10 years old. So they wouldn't be able to make any progress in their lives. Now Chu Yang had reached king level expert at the age of 18. Then how big would his future development be? County level? Definitely more than that. The saint level? It was very possible. Thinking of this, the 2 shadows looked at Chu Yang in front of them. They suddenly felt that they were looking up at a tall mountain. You're a king-level expert? Tai Budian looked at Chu Yang. There was a trace of pride in her eyes. Yes. Chu Yang laughed. Actually, it's not a big deal. If you didn't have so many things to do with your aptitude, you wouldn't be, I'm bad. Tai Budian laughed and said, not necessarily. One of the shadows asked, then what kind of king are you? This question came out of nowhere. But Chu Yang understood the meaning of this sentence. He smiled and said, I'm a sword king. King Ko. The two shadows were shocked once again. He wasn't an ordinary king-level expert. He was a sword king, one of the hardest king-level experts to reach. Since the Tribulation Sword Master appeared in this heavenly layer, the sword had become a sacred weapon in this heavenly layer. This also led to the fact that the majority of moonsword martial artists in the world were martial artists. There were no clear rules for other martial arts. Only the sword. When one broke through the king-level expert and reached the emperor level, he would be a sword emperor. And not a sword emperor. This was the rule of the Tribulation Sword Master. No one had dared to disobey it for tens of thousands of years. Moreover, Sword Emperor had become the supreme honor of a sword cultivator. It could be said that a first-grade sword emperor could easily kill a saber emperor of the same grade. The might of a sword cultivator could be imagined. A sword king at such a young age. The two shadows looked at each other. They were speechless. That was because they had understood the meaning of each other's eyes. How many sword kings are there in the big clans of the upper three heavens at such a young age? Such a person has appeared in the lower three heavens instead of the upper three heavens. What does this mean? How much would it cost to nurture such a person in the big clans of the upper three heavens? They can't even think about it. That massive amount of elixirs and heavenly treasures is enough to bankrupt an ordinary small clan. Or, is this a good thing? The two shadows had this thought in their hearts. I don't know how the heaven-splitting mountain pass is. Tai Budian was standing on a big rock. She was looking into the distance. Her expression was faint. But one could see that she was anxious. There shouldn't be any problem, Chu Kuang comforted her. Chu Yang comforted him. Wu Kuangyun is good at fighting. Moreover, he seems to be straightforward. But he's brave and resourceful. He makes quick decisions. He's willing to give up when he has to. And he has a good grasp of gains and losses. He's willing to risk hundreds of kilometers to go back. Moreover, the heaven-splitting mountain pass is a natural stronghold. He knew what Tai Budian was worried about. And his words had dispelled Tai Butian's worries. Yes, there isn't enough time to withdraw all 500,000 people into the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Wu Kuangyun must make sacrifices to ensure the safety of the majority of his troops. And he must ensure that the mountain pass doesn't fall into his hands. The key point is how to give up. However, the two of them hadn't expected that the attack and defense of the heaven-splitting mountain pass would be so fierce and earth-shattering. Diwu Qingrou's calculations were extremely accurate. He had calculated every detail from thousands of kilometers away. He could have defeated Tai Butian's troops in one fell swoop if he had followed his plan. But he hadn't calculated one thing. And he hadn't calculated this one thing. And it had led to a change in the course of the war. Ripples have been erupting for a few days now. But I can't erupt today. It took me more than 10 hours to write 1,000 words. Chapter 375. Diwu Qingrou had envisioned that Jing Menggure would lead his winged horse. After killing King of Hell Chu at the last moment, they would continue to create obstacles for the Iron Cloud's army. They would delay the enemy for 2 to 4 hours. And this should be the case. In fact, 3,000 experts could have rushed to the front of the army to set up roadblocks to stop the cavalry since they were dozens of times more skilled than ordinary soldiers. It would have been very easy to do these things in this mountainous forest. They could have casually cut down a few big trees. Moreover, Diwu Qingrou had ordered the entire mountainous forest to be set ablaze. This had created a terrifying atmosphere. Jing Minghun would have been able to delay the enemy for 2 to 4 hours under such circumstances. Moreover, Diwu Qingrou had envisioned that Tai Butian would have needed to find King of Hell Chu's whereabouts. This would have required time and energy. In general, Tai Butian's return journey would have been delayed by no less than 4 hours. She might have been unable to complete the task in 8 hours or even 16 hours. But Diwu Qingrou only needed 4 hours. This requirement wasn't high. The delay of 4 hours would have been more than enough even if someone had planned this journey. However, these 4 hours were the most important time. In other words, Diwu Qingrou's 300-kilometer journey would have taken place. 4 hours wasn't a short time. But the elite cavalry wouldn't have been able to cover 300-kilometer distance after a long journey. But it was enough to shorten the distance by 250 kilometer. In fact, it might have been even shorter. The enemy would have fallen into chaos as long as they'd seen or heard the movements of the cavalry. Wuxia needed this kind of internal turmoil. That was because hundreds of thousands of troops couldn't pass through the slanting valley in an orderly manner at such a distance. They wouldn't have been able to pass through if there had been internal chaos. They would have only been able to squeeze into a group. This was human nature. Everyone wanted to live. Everyone wanted to squeeze forward to find a way to survive. Even experienced soldiers would have been reduced to a motley crew in such a chaotic situation. Wuxia had grasped the timing very well. These 4 hours were the time to unify the world. The war between the two nations would have ended within these 4 hours. And the final outcome of the war would have been decided within these 4 hours. However, Wuxia had never expected that the king-level experts who had led thousands of experts wouldn't be able to do anything in the blink of an eye. They did not make any effort to stop the army and fled. That was because Wuxia had never imagined that King of Hell Chu, who should have been on the verge of death, would have erupted with such a terrifying fighting strength at such a critical juncture. Jing Minghun had besieged 3,000 experts. But Yi Shiwen had single-handedly killed more than 1,000 of them. Even Jing Minghun, who was at the peak of the king level, had sustained serious injuries. He was fleeing for his life in distress. This was a terrifying variable, and also a variable that no one would have thought of even if they cracked their heads. Moreover, he hadn't expected that King of Hell Chu and Tai Butian's army would arrive at the same time. They met head-on. This way all the searching time would be saved. Then Tai Butian made a prompt decision, and ordered Wu Kuangyun to lead the army back. This saved a lot of time. And the time that Wuxia's army could take advantage of had become very small under this situation. Fortunately, the 3 generals that Wuxia had selected were daredevils who were eager to make progress. They didn't have a 4-hour buffer. But they had been galloping as fast as they could. And they had managed to shorten the time. This had gradually made the situation close to a stalemate. Wu Kuangyun had used a hawk to send a message on the way back to reinforce his army. I order Wu Yi to return to the heaven-splitting mountain pass as soon as possible. And he clearly stated, I, Wu Kuangyun, won't come out of the heaven-splitting mountain pass to provide support if both our army and the enemy arrive at the same time. Wu Yi saw the urgency of the situation after he received this message. So he immediately ordered his 200,000 troops to rush back overnight. Only an empty slanting valley was left behind. Wu Kuangyun's cavalry rushed into the slanting valley like a thunderbolt while they were retreating into the mountain pass. They went straight into the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Wu Kuangyun's cavalry entered the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Then Wuxia's 3 armies arrived at the same time. Wu Kuangyun's rear army, nearly 50,000 men, were overtaken outside the heaven-splitting mountain pass. They were forced to turn around and fight to the death with the enemy. None of the 500 officers and men survived this battle. The enemy had also crossed the slanting valley, and had stationed their troops under the heaven-splitting mountain pass. They took advantage of the aftermath of the battle, and launched a siege on the city without stopping for even a moment. The heaven-splitting mountain pass's natural stronghold played a huge role at this moment. Hundreds of thousands of people were attacking the heaven-splitting mountain pass at every moment. And even more people were rushing forward at every moment. Both sides wanted to attack but couldn't. Wu Kuangyun wanted to attack, but couldn't because he had to defend the heaven-splitting mountain pass. After that, he had to provide support to His Majesty. Therefore he couldn't retreat even an inch. He relied on the natural stronghold to fight without retreating. And the 3 tiger generals of Great Zhao were in an even more difficult situation. They hadn't expected that they would fall into such an incomparably dangerous situation. They advanced triumphantly and defeated the enemy along the way. They rushed into the slanting valley with irresistible force, and rushed to the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Then they found out, what the fuck is this place? The slanting valley stretched for hundreds of kilometers. It was surrounded by cliffs on both sides. But they found themselves in such a large open space after entering the valley. It was hundreds of kilometers in radius. In fact, it looked like a huge gourd with an incomparably long stem. It would be very difficult to get out after entering this place. Their front and back had entered this open space. And their rear and back were still in the slanting valley. This kind of situation was simply unbearable to the extreme. The heaven-splitting mountain pass was a natural stronghold in front of them. But how could they retreat? Wu Kuangyun of the heaven-splitting mountain pass would certainly come out and chase after them if they retreated to a certain extent. Then they wouldn't be able to advance or retreat in this narrow slanting valley. In fact, they would be bound to be annihilated by the enemy if they retreated to a certain extent. And that would be a huge sacrifice. Moreover, they were reluctant to give up this great opportunity. So, the three of them were riding a tiger and couldn't get off. Moreover, these three people were the Golden Tiger General Jin Nangkai, the Silver Tiger General Long Ao, and the Jade Tiger General Yu Qinglong. These three were aggressive generals. To put it nicely, they were brave and good at fighting. And to put it bluntly, they were the king's disciples. These three people were the king's disciples. And they were staunch supporters of the king's disciples. And they had been selected by Diwu Qingro to carry out this 1,000-mile mission because of their special characteristics. However, Diwu Qingro had been cautious all his life. But he had made a huge mistake here. That was because he hadn't said what to do in case such a situation occurred. And that was because he hadn't thought that such a situation would occur. At the very least, they would have severely injured the enemy. And they would have won a glorious victory. However, this glorious victory had turned into a situation where they couldn't get off the tiger because of King of Hell Chu. And this was something that Diwu Qingro hadn't thought of even if he had heaven-defying wisdom. These three king's disciples, who were riding a tiger and couldn't get off the tiger, had given the order to gather all the rocks and trees in the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Then they had set it on fire. And the heaven-splitting mountain pass was suddenly filled with a terrible stench. That pungent smell made people want to vomit. This move was simply cruel and inhumane. Both the enemy and the king's disciples felt a chill down their spines. There were more than 100,000 corpses in the slanting valley. They hadn't had enough time to clean up the corpses from the previous battle. So, there were more than 300,000 corpses this time. There were some corpses of ironclad soldiers. But most of them belonged to Great Zhao. How could a mountain of incense be set on fire? Who wouldn't feel sorry for the rabbit and the fox? We fought for Great Zhao. 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 That's what we should do. Because we're Great Zhao's people. But, even our corpses have become weapons against the enemy after we've fought. Isn't this too cruel and inhumane? A tree that's 1,000 feet tall will return to its roots. But our ashes won't even be able to return home? What if I'm the next one to die? Won't my corpses also be thrown into this fire? Will they become a pile of skeletons after being set on fire? The fire was burning fiercely. Countless soldiers on and below the city walls were deep in thought. Each of them was thinking about their own matters. And this noisy battlefield suddenly became silent. The three tiger generals were helpless. What do you want us to do? Don't burn? Do we want to burn? But this is summer. The weather is hot. If we don't deal with the corpses, it'll lead to a plague. Once the plague was unleashed, all of the 1 million Gue present would die here. Digging holes to bury them is unrealistic. This is a mountainous area. Brothers, you can chop down with your axe and leave a white mark on the ground. Stone fragments will fly everywhere. Well, these three teams don't need to bury hundreds of thousands of corpses. So they don't need to do anything else. However, the three tiger generals didn't have much of an effect even though they had tried to explain. The implementation was like this. But understanding it or not was another matter. Even if we burn them, we can't burn them like weapons, right? The battle was at a stalemate. They attacked the city every day. The results weren't great. But the three tiger generals were helpless. They couldn't think of any other way. So they could only suffer day after day. Wu Kuangyun was burning with impatience inside the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Motherfucker. If you can't attack, then retreat. This old he promises that he won't pursue you. Once you leave, this old he will send you off with a Yanga song. But what's the point of being entangled here? This old he still has to go and rescue his majesty. Chapter 376. However, the enemy didn't retreat after Wu Kuangyun's words. Instead, they became even more vigilant. Their attacks became even more intensive. Long Ao urged his horse forward and scolded Wu Kuangyun, "Motherfucker! Do you think you still have any credibility? You've already turned into a pile of fucking ashes. You still want to swear on it? Or are you trying to deceive? You think that everyone is as stupid as your Wu clan?" Wu Kuangyun was furious. He scolded, "You're old. You dare to scold me? You're disobedient and unfilial. You're wicked beyond redemption. You're deceiving your master and destroying your ancestors. You're treacherous. Long AO you motherfucking B asterisk starred. You're a B asterisk starred born of a black turtle. This persuasion eventually developed into a quarrel between the two armies. The two of them weren't satisfied with the quarrel. So they gathered their subordinates and lined them up. Then they shouted and cursed together. Wu Kuangyin didn't want to be outdone. He divided the defenders into several groups. Then they took turns to go into battle. He was shirtless as he shouted. That atmosphere was truly earth-shattering. They cursed until the sky turned dark. They cursed until the sun and moon lost their light. Each of these soldiers is a boorish man. Each of them is an expert in cursing. So, they used all kinds of vulgar language to curse people. There were hundreds of thousands of people on the city wall. They cursed until their female relatives could be traced back to 17 or 18 generations of ancestors. Meanwhile, Chuyang, Tai Butian, and the others were taking a detour to this place. Tai Butian and the shadows didn't know that there was another way to the heaven-splitting mountain pass. However, Minister Chu led the way. Not only did they find a winding path, but Minister Chu also had time to find a rare wild ginseng and a 100-year-old red spirit mushroom on both sides of the path. He also collected a pile of Solomon's seal flower and other things. The two experienced and knowledgeable shadows were flabbergasted by this ability. How did this guy find these things? Chuyang would often make an "oh" sound while he was walking. Then he would sniff and squat down to take a look. Then he would dig through the grass and find a medicinal herb. Moreover, each of them could be regarded as a top-quality item. This ability is heaven-defying. With this ability, even if his aptitude was poor, he would still be able to improve his cultivation. The two shadow hearts thought to themselves. This was a road, a veritable narrow path. The narrowest part was so narrow that a thin person could barely squeeze through. Moreover, there were many such narrow places. Fortunately, the four of them were not fat, so they were able to squeeze through. Along the way, Minister Chu discovered that when other people passed through such places, they generally had an easy time. Only the skinny and petite Tai Budian actually had her chest squeezed a few times when she passed through such places. This made Minister Chu very puzzled. This guy's chest is flat. He's so thin. His chest muscles aren't developed either. Why did he have to squeeze in? This is really weird. The mountain path was getting more and more difficult to walk. It was unknown how many years ago this was a small path. Now there was basically no road. The path was densely covered with thistles and thorns. They had not even climbed half of the peak when they reached the point where it was almost impossible to move an inch. If not for the fact that the four of them had high cultivation bases, it would have been very difficult for them to make it here. In the end, when Tai Buqian's strength was insufficient, one of them had to carry her. Chuyang felt a little apologetic. After all, this shadow looked like an old man with wrinkled skin and white hair. Chuyang was young and strong. Moreover, he was a martial king. Therefore, he suggested that he carry her for a while. He did not expect that as soon as he said this, he would be strongly opposed by the two shadows and Tai Budian. The intensity of these three people's reactions gave Chuyang a fright. He had no choice but to continue to let the old man carry Tai Budian. He secretly cursed in his heart. Are you guys afraid that I'll throw this emperor down the cliff? Therefore he was a little depressed. At the same time he was also a little puzzled. It's true that Tai Budian wants the shadows to carry her. But why is she the only one carrying her? The other one doesn't even know to suggest that she should switch hands. Seeing her own brother so tired that he's breathing white smoke, Tai Budian was also helpless. The illusion effect of the jade pendant could only deceive one's vision but not one's feelings. If Chuyang were to carry her, he would definitely feel that something was wrong. As for herself, she only wanted one to carry her. Because of these two shadows. Although she had always called them uncles, in fact, they were a couple. They finally arrived at the top of the mountain after passing over one cliff after another. The biting cold wind was whistling at the top of the mountain. The four of them had to circulate their martial power to stand still. It was midsummer, but the top of the mountain was still very cold. We'll reach the heaven-splitting mountain pass if we go down that side of the mountain. However, there's a concave cliff that we can't descend if we want to enter the heaven-splitting mountain pass. That section is 70 or 80 feet high. Chuyang pointed his finger and said, "Below this protruding cliff is the slanting valley." Tai Budian nodded. She thoughtfully looked down below. "Your Majesty, you don't need to worry. The road we've taken is an extremely hidden path. Only revered martial artists and above can climb up here. It would be even more ridiculous if the army were to pass through here." Tai Budian faintly smiled and said, "I'm not worried about this. I heard you say that the slanting valley is below here. Wu Kuangyun is guarding the mountain pass. So, the army of the Great Whip Army must be guarding the slanting valley. How can we destroy them? Or what can we do if we descend the pole? It can't be a coincidence, right? Ing said, you must know that there must be a suitable terrain. How can we know if it's a coincidence or not if we don't take a look? Tai Budian frowned and said, moreover, it's not easy to come up here. So, I won't be willing to go down without doing anything. However, she didn't notice that Chu Yang had begun to frown and think hard since she had said this. Then Chu Yang said, I have an idea in that case. Come with me. Then he went down the same way he had come. Tai Budian and the other two didn't know what he was doing. So they had no choice but to follow him. They could vaguely hear the vigorous cursing from below. The mountain was high, but 3 of the 4 king-level experts had superhuman hearing. So how could they not hear it? Awesome. Chu Yang said from the bottom of his heart, to be able to fight to Wu Kuangyun's level, it can be said that no one has ever done it before. Tai Budian almost burst into laughter and said, it seems that General Wu is also very anxious. How can he not be anxious? He abandoned you, the Li Emperor, and ran back alone. Even though it was your order, if something happened he wouldn't be able to explain himself even if he jumped into the heavenly river. Right now this guy's heart must be scratching with 100 claws. But he's still suffering in silence. He can't speak of his bitterness. Chu Yang mischievously smiled and said, General Wu must be feeling very good right now. Tai Budian finally couldn't help but laugh and said, yes, you can ask him when you see him. Then you'll know how good he is. She suddenly blushed as she said this. It was unknown what she had thought of. I don't need to ask him. I know what he will say. Chu Yang curled his lips. What will he say? Tai Budian asked curiously. If he sees you go back and I ask him how he felt when His Majesty wasn't around, how would he feel? How good would he feel? Chu Yang immediately said, once he's relaxed he'll definitely say that. Do you? Tai Budian asked curiously. Chu Yang suddenly imitated Wu Kuangyun's hoarse and rough voice. He covered his chest and shouted, Wu, so good. I feel so good Wu. Her movements were gentle and graceful and her voice lingered in the air. It was enough to make one's imagination run wild. Tai Budian staggered and almost rolled down the mountain. She kicked Chu Yang's buttocks and said with a flushed face, nonsense. How could there be such a thing? The 2 shadows staggered and nearly fell down. They stood up and didn't know whether to laugh or cry as they looked at Minister Chu. They stared at him for a long time and didn't know what to say, but you're pretty good at imitating his voice. Tai Budian composed herself and said with a smile, I heard that the 2 of you know each other? Yeah, we've known each other for a long time. Our relationship is very good. Chu Yang shook his head and sighed, I caught him when he tried to assassinate Du Shiqing. He was my captive for more than 10 days. During those days he shouted and cursed every day. It was impossible not to be familiar with his voice. But later he annoyed me. I said something and he immediately became obedient. What did you say that was so effective? Tai Budian was even more curious. With Wu Kuangyun's temperament he sometimes dared to yell at Tai Longcheng. But Chu Yang and Wu Kuangyun were in a hostile position at that time. So, what could Chu Yang say to Wu Kuangyun that would immediately make him behave? I said, if you scold me one more time, I will immediately feed aphrodisiac to all the warhorses. Then I will take off their clothes and put them in the warhorse shed. Chu Yang narrowed his eyes and said in a pleased manner. You. Tai Buqian's intuition stirred. She almost jumped off the cliff because of this sentence. Not for Wu Kuangyun but for herself. Feed him aphrodisiac and then put him in a position. Isn't this the same thing that happened the night before when Chu Yang was unconscious after taking aphrodisiac? Is he talking about me? Was he conscious at that time? Tai Budian was so ashamed that she couldn't restrain herself. She angrily asked, what do you mean? The 2 shadows looked at each other in dismay. This minister is very sad. Minister Chu was startled. He looked at her innocently, scratched his head and said, what's wrong? Tai Budian suddenly realized that she had misunderstood. She looked at this guy's expression. How could he have disguised himself when he was caught off guard? He must have threatened Wu Kuangyun. However, she was still angry when she thought about it. She clasped her hands behind her back and walked away angrily. Chapter 377. Minister Chu's eyes widened innocently. You felt very wronged. You asked me to say this, okay? I said it to amuse you. Why did you suddenly get angry? It's really hard to fathom the emperor's appearance. No wonder they say that accompanying the emperor is like accompanying a tiger. These words are really true. You deserve to be scolded. The two shadows glared at him fiercely and chose to agree with the emperor without any mercy. They despised this bastard who abandoned her after having sex with her. Chuyang looked at the backs of the three people in a daze. He was so depressed that he couldn't bear it anymore. He shouted, "Crap, what's going on? What's going on? Crap, I'm being wronged. This is too unclear. Why did I suddenly provoke public anger?" The other three people had their own thoughts. But they couldn't help but laugh when they heard that this guy was so depressed. "Well, here it is. We're here." Chuyang pointed to the front. These three people didn't pay any attention to him after he told them how to deal with Wu Kuangyun. He kept his head down and racked his brains. He thought, there's nothing wrong with what I said. Why did the three of them get angry? What's going on? The more you talk, the more mistakes you make. They finally arrived at the destination. So they heaved a sigh of relief. It must be said that it wasn't a good feeling to leave people hanging like that. Especially when they were still in a heated discussion just a moment ago, and the next moment, they were all angry because of what he said. Anyone would be at a loss. So what if it's here? Tai Budian asked. There's a cliff here. There's a slight slope. You can't see it from here. It's more than 3,000 feet down. It's a slope. It's very steep. So it's impossible to come up from below. But it doesn't prevent you from going down. Chuyang said, of course people can't go down. What are you talking about if people can't go down? Tai Butian squinted at him. She had been trying to tease him ever since he said that. But other things can go down. For example, stones. Chuyang mischievously smiled and said, I remember that the slope here is slanting downwards. Then it rushes into the slanting valley, that road, and the slanting valley is now crowded with Great Zhao's army. Haha, this is very interesting. Tai Butian's expression changed at once. Her eyes also sharpened at once. You mean? Chuyang smiled and said, my idea is very simple. Since a part of Great Zhao's army is crowded in this narrow slanting valley, then we might as well open up a bloody path for them. Moreover, we can cut off their supplies to a certain extent. In Chuyang's smile, there was something called cruelty faintly shining. Even the two shadows couldn't help but shudder when they saw his expression. Tai Budian pondered for a moment before saying, you're right, but with just the strength of the three of us, we're overestimating ourselves. She lowered her head and thought for a while. Then she said, even if we use rolling logs and rocks with our strength, we won't be able to do much damage. At most, we'll just be a distraction. It won't be of much use. That's why I said I had to find a suitable terrain. Otherwise, why do you think I brought you all around? Chuyang was very surprised at Tai Butian's stupidity. Why didn't she use her brain at all? However, he didn't know that most women had a special characteristic. As long as there was a reliable man by their side, they would be used to letting their man solve any problem. They would never consider that they could solve any problem easily. Tell us your plan. Tai Budian also realized that she was acting strangely. She coughed twice to cover it up and said, do you see that mountain? Chuyang pointed at a mountain peak in front of them that was hidden in the clouds and said excitedly. The three of them looked at it and were shocked. They saw that a few thousand feet in front of them, there was a mountain peak that protruded out. It was like a huge arm that pierced straight into the sky. They didn't know how high it was above the clouds. The top of the mountain was smooth and there weren't any weeds or trees. It was like a rock that stood between the heavens and the earth. Do you see it? That mountain peak is just right. We only need to push it down and it will rush down the slope by itself. When it rushes down, it should be right in the middle of the slanting valley. I reckon that with such a huge momentum, it should be able to rush forward for another few dozen li like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Moreover, there should be at least 100,000 Great Zhao's army in between these few dozen li, and all of them should be turned into minced meat by then. Chuyang pointed at the mountains and rivers in a very imposing manner. He didn't notice that the three people beside him were dumbstruck. They were looking at him as if they were looking at a monster. Push it down? Tai Budian looked at Chuyang as if she was looking at a prehistoric creature. Then she said after a long while, Minister Chu, I have to say that your idea is very good. Moreover, if this mountain peak is pushed down, it will cause more than 100,000 casualties. But the problem is, how are you going to push it down? Let's not talk about the weight. Let's talk about the size of this mountain peak. Even if we look at it now, it will still be several hundred feet tall. And its diameter will also be several hundred feet. Let's not talk about pushing it down with the strength of the four of us. We won't even be able to make it sway a little with our strength. Chu Yang immediately smiled and said, I didn't say that I would push it down at once. This kind of thing has to be done step by step. Strike while the iron is hot. Moreover, I have to tease it slowly. When the time is right, it will be half unwilling and half willing. Yes, once it enters the harbor, it will be directly destroyed with a bang, and it will be a success. Minister Chu's words made the two women of the three people blush at the same time. What is this bastard talking about? It sounds like a wolf is molesting a little girl. How did a good plan to kill the enemy turn into such a wretched thing when it came out of his mouth? The two figures shook their heads as they looked at the mountain peak. Even a martial monarch would find it difficult to get rid of such a mountain peak, right? Not to mention, the only people who could do this were the legendary martial sages and the supreme martial artists who were above martial sages. Of course, if a supreme martial artist were to come, he would probably be able to slap this mountain peak down with a wave of his hand. Furthermore, if such a person were to deal with such a human army, would he still need a mountain peak? One person would be enough to kill. With the three of them only having the strength of a martial king, it was absolutely impossible. I have an idea. Chu Yang said confidently, it's just that it will take some time. We can't do it in a short time. Tai Budian curled her lips and said, if we only push it down next year, then we don't need to push it anymore. How is that possible? Chu Yang said angrily, we only need 2 days. It won't even take 2 days. He waved his hand arrogantly and said, if you want to win this battle, then listen to me and follow me. As he said that, he took the lead and walked towards the mountain peak. The three of them had no choice but to follow behind him. They also had the thought of watching him make a fool of himself. The closer they got, the more they felt that Chu Yang's idea was completely unreasonable. It was too big. However, it was also very strange. The entire mountain was made up of rocks. We can't rule out the possibility that there were some bigger rocks here. In fact, there were even huge rocks that weighed millions of kilograms. However, it was somewhat unimaginable that such a huge rock was standing at the highest point of the mountain peak. It could only be said that this was a big sight between heaven and earth. I don't know the name of this mountain, but this mountain peak is called Chunyang Peak. It was very famous in the vicinity. This Chunyang Peak was formed by a single piece of rock. Regarding this rock of the Chunyang Peak, there's also an allusion to it. Chu Yang said in a deep voice while walking, do you know? What allusion? The three asked. What Chunyang Peak? The three of them had come here for the first time. So, they didn't know anything about it. This illusion? Haha, it's really difficult to talk about it. Fortunately, there are no women here. I wouldn't have said it if there were. Minister Chu smiled in a somewhat vulgar manner. His eyebrows jumped up and down. He looked at the three of them with a look that said, you know, all men know. He didn't know how ridiculous it was for him to say, fortunately, there are no women here. There were 3 people in front of him. And 2 of them were women. The 3 of them were angry and amused at the same time. They felt somewhat powerless against this guy's nerves from time to time. What's the illusion? Ing asked this time. Look, this mountain peak is straight from the bottom to the top. Moreover, it's divided into the left and right sides. There are also 2 oval-shaped bases. Well, it's very big. It doesn't look very vivid. But it doesn't matter. The key is at the top. Minister Chu chuckled as he walked in with the 3 of them. He waved his hand as if he had just discovered something. Then he said excitedly, look, there's a mushroom head at the top. It's a lot thicker than this one. Did you think of it? Ah. Chu Yang grinned. He was overjoyed as he looked at the situation. But Tai Budian and the other 2 stared at him with puzzled looks on their faces. You guys really don't have the slightest bit of imagination. Chu Yang sighed helplessly. Did you guys realize what it would look like if this thing was shrunk a few 100,000 times? At this point he became a little excited. He chuckled and said, think about it. We also have this thing. Ah, it's really not much different. Think about it carefully. Doesn't it look like it? Doesn't it look like it? The 3 of them shook their heads blankly. However, among the 3 of them, 2 of them really didn't think of it. As for the other one, he was trying so hard to hold back his laughter that he was about to suffer internal injuries. He couldn't laugh. He would be in trouble if he laughed. What should have been Minister Chu's misfortune would immediately be transferred to him. Chapter 378. I can't wait to take off my pants and compare them with you guys. Chu Yang waited impatiently, looking at this face, looking at that face, with a lewd expression that would immediately burst out laughing after being recognized. He looked at the three people expectantly, but what he saw were three inexplicable faces and three pairs of very doubtful eyes. Minister Chu's face finally collapsed bit by bit. Finally, he couldn't hold it in any longer and said very gloomily, "Don't you guys think that this thing is really very similar to that thing in our pants?" Minister Chu was about to go crazy. He had never told a joke that had made him this depressed. These three people were too humorless. Minister Chu's gloom wasn't without reason, because he had directly messed up the whole thing. He really didn't know that it wasn't that they couldn't think of the thing he said, but that one sentence he said really misled them. "We also have it on us." It was this sentence that ruined the whole thing. "You said you have it?" The problem was that they didn't have it on them. They really didn't. They obviously didn't have it, but you said you did. Could it be that they didn't have it? So Minister Chu couldn't help but go crazy. The last sentence was roared out very gloomily. As soon as he said this, the three people immediately understood. Even those who didn't immediately understood. In an instant, one of them, who had long suffered internal injuries from holding it in, immediately held his stomach and laughed wildly. I finally laughed out loud. I almost choked to death. As for the other two, they looked at Chu Yang angrily. Looking at their postures, they were about to pounce on him and give him a good beating. Minister Chu saw that someone had finally understood his intentions. So he was about to let out a wild laugh. But he was greeted by two ice-cold and angry glares. These glares were enough to stab him to death with 1,000 cuts. Minister Chu only felt a chill down his spine. He was about to burst out laughing, but he held it back. He smiled embarrassedly, touched his nose and scratched his head. He said, "Why isn't it funny?" "It's funny." Tai Budian gritted her teeth and tried her best not to explode. Suddenly she exploded in anger. "Funny your head. So vulgar, so despicable, so... You actually dare to say it out loud and even so proud of it? You really have no sense of shame." Tue Ying didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Chu Yang. He really wanted to beat him up. Chu Yang was dumbfounded. She really didn't know why this joke, which was supposed to be unstoppable among men, had the opposite effect at this moment. This was simply too shocking. Could it be that after becoming an emperor, he was different from ordinary men? "You don't even have something to laugh about? Aren't you going to tell us your story?" Tai Budian said angrily. He couldn't wait to change the topic. This joke was really embarrassing. Tai Buqian's face was already flushed red. "Saying this in front of me is simply hateful." "How hateful? What a bastard." I don't dare to say it." Chu Yang drooped his head and said weakly. He thought to himself, "I've only said a few words, and there's already such an intense reaction. If I wait until the story is told, won't I be hacked to pieces?" "Go on, it's all right," the male figure encouraged, his eyes full of schadenfreude. "Say it." Tai Buqian's face was cold, but there was also a hint of a smile that she was trying hard to suppress in her eyes. It really wasn't good to smile. "This bastard. Yes, it's like this. Legend has it that there was once a man who was quite good-looking and very rich, but he couldn't find a wife no matter what. He lived until he was over 80 years old, but still couldn't find a wife. He died of depression." As Chu Yang spoke, he stole glances at their expressions. Seeing that there was nothing wrong, he went on boldly. "So, after he was reincarnated, he was still very handsome, suave and rich, but he still couldn't find a wife when he was 80 years old. He died again." At this point, the three of them were also stunned. What kind of story was this? What does this have to do with this mountain peak? Tai Budian raised her eyebrows and couldn't help but ask. She really didn't know what the purpose of such a ridiculous story was. "Don't be anxious, you'll know if you continue listening." Chu Yang comforted her. Just like that, he reincarnated continuously. In his last life before he died, he found out that he was actually a bachelor. This world's virgin has finally erupted like a volcanic eruption. With a sorrowful expression and a sorrowful tone, Chu Yang said, "So, before he died, he made a great wish. If there are men in this world, there will be women. If there are women, there will be men. Yin and Yang will harmonize and all living things will flourish. This is the principle of Yin and Yang in this world. Unfortunately, I'm talented and virtuous, but I'm a bachelor. This is nothing more than heaven's teasing. Where's justice? Where's humanity? Where's the heavenly Tao? Where's the justice?" Chu Yang's cadence paused for a moment as he spoke till here. The other three couldn't help but be attracted by this story. Thinking of how heaven had wrongly arranged marriage, causing a talented and good-looking young man to be a bachelor for several lifetimes, it really made one sigh. Other than the words "the justice is unfair," there was really nothing else to say, especially when Tai Budian thought of herself. She couldn't help but sigh. Could it be that I've also wrongly arranged marriage in this life of mine? They shouldn't have met, but they did. They should have been together, but due to various reasons she was destined to be alone for the rest of her life. How was she different from the man in the story? She couldn't help but sigh and ask, then, what great wish did he make? To have many wives and concubines in his next life? She thought, according to the thoughts of an ordinary man, this should be it. After living a bachelor for several lifetimes, it's understandable to have such a wish. No. Chu Yang smiled strangely and continued to narrate. He looked up to heaven and shouted, if yin and yang can't be harmonized, what's the use of heaven? So what if I'm reincarnated again? Everyone in this world harmonizes and complements each other. Heaven alone is so unfair to me. If this can be tolerated, what else can? Although I can't harmonize yin and yang in this life, even if I die, I will still lead heaven. Tai Budian let out an ah, and was instantly speechless. She only felt that her heart was about to stop beating at this moment. In that instant she was filled with regret. She really had nothing better to do. She let this guy talk about the story here. Great, now it's so awkward. Chu Yang was overjoyed. As he spoke, he laughed and shrugged his shoulders. After he finished speaking, he took off all his clothes. Then he spread his legs and lay down on his back, dead. His resentment shot straight to the sky. Suddenly, lightning flashed and thunder roared. His body suddenly underwent an unbelievable change. Tai Budian wanted to ask, what change? But after thinking about it, she held back. She guessed that this guy wouldn't say anything good. As the saying goes, nothing good comes out of a dog's mouth. His body turned into a mountain range, his arms turned into canyons, his blood turned into rivers, his hair turned into flowers, plants, and trees. Thus, a towering mountain rose into the sky. But the thing under his crotch, as per his request before he died, stood straight at the highest point of this mountain range and rushed straight to the sky. As if it wanted to, make a huge hole in the sky. The other three were already like ducks that had been shocked silly by a thunderstorm. They were in a daze as they broke out in cold sweat. This story was really speechless. Thus, there was this Chunyang Peak in front of us. Minister Chu finally drew the curtains to this story. Smacking his lips, he looked at this round dashi Kwang in front of him with great respect. He said as if he hadn't had enough, so, this mountain peak has another name. Everyone is more familiar with it and it's very similar. Stop talking. Don't continue. Tai Budian shouted. Her face turned from white to red, from red to blue, and from blue to black. She was so angry that even her belly was about to explode. She thought about how she had felt the same way just now. She was secretly sorrowful and self-pitying. All those emotions, and in the end, such a story actually came out. She couldn't help but feel ashamed. If it weren't for the magical jade pendant, she would have been furious. Looking at Chu Yang, she couldn't help but be furious. Glaring at Chu Yang, Tai Budian gritted her teeth and said word by word, Minister Chu, you're really knowledgeable. Haha. Chu Yang's face was already smiling like a flower. He was laughing so hard that his whole body was shaking and he couldn't speak. He was like a small mimosa plant swaying in the wind. Even his laughter was trembling. Wah! He. Tai Budian was speechless. Telling this joke to a man was really nothing. But the problem was, Minister Chu was in a complete tragedy. Just as he was convulsing with laughter, he was suddenly held down by Tai Budian and another shadow. Minister Chu was caught off guard. Moreover, he was so pleased with himself that he lost his sense of measure. So how could he evade? So he was captured in a neat and tidy move. Then it was a series of punches and kicks. Bang bang bang, puff puff puff. Poor Minister Chu didn't know where this unexpected disaster came from. He was beaten several times but still didn't have time to stop laughing. After a long while he suddenly flew into a rage. What's going on? What's going on? The two women beat him up fiercely. Minister Chu screamed incessantly. After a long while the two women got tired of beating him up. They finally stopped, panting, and let go of him. Minister Chu jumped up, his whole body aching. He flew into a rage. Why did you beat me up? Is there still any law? The alliance is the law. Tai Budian snorted, rubbing her wrist that was hurting from the beating. She said proudly. Her anger still hadn't subsided. The moment she said that, the two shadows couldn't help but laugh even more. The Emperor is right here. What law is there to talk about? If someone else said this, they would be showing off and not knowing the immensity of heaven and earth. But the Emperor said that he was the law. Who could refute that? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.